Wallace and Gromit, truly a duo who need no introduction. So I'm not going to give them one, you know who they are. If you were to ask anyone how much Wallace and Gromit media there is in existence and what chronological order they're probably in, you'd probably assume, yeah, well, there's a few shorts, a couple of features, maybe an advert here or there, and they're probably just in the order that they came out in, and the adverts probably don't count anyway. But how wrong you'd be. Believe me when I say there is so much Wallace and Gromit adjacent media out there just waiting to be entirely overanalyzed by a guy with a pinboard and a week off after Ben Stiller failed to disclose that season 2 of Severance was releasing weekly instead of all at once. Nothing is off the table for this. I can't understate that any piece of Wallace and Gromit adjacent media is on here. If it's made by or endorsed by officially Aardman, and those two are in it in some capacity, it counts. There is so much of this. This script is over 30 pages long. For reference, the SpongeBob video script was only half that. With that said, I feel like we do need to lay a couple of ground rules quickly. As funny as it would be to try and fit in Gromit gets the chair, or feeding Gromit, or the we have to hide the bodies one, I'm going to stick to officially licensed material here, because otherwise that goes even more into insanity than we already are, and is literally endless. Well, not literally. Basic, you know what I mean. So no Traveller's Tales proof of concept animation thing, or the unlicensed use of Feathers McGraw in Reboot, or... since for the purposes of this, they're essentially on the same level as the fan-made parodies. But don't let that fool you into thinking I'm just taking the easy way out here. Look at how long this video is. Look at how many lines I've had to put on this timeline, and I've not tried it yet. I might have to add more as we go.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
I sure can't wait to fit in the Flash games and the Japanese TV adverts and the random one-off photo shoots and... I'd also like to preface this whole thing by just clarifying that all of this is completely pointless. All of this is entirely fictional, obviously, and none of it actually matters at all. As discussed by SomeBoiOnline in his interview with Nick Park and Merlin Crossingham, very little credence is given to the continuity between these films, and ultimately, that's fine. But, you know, there's something fun about overanalyzing these things beyond all reason. Sure hope I've got enough pins. Okay, first things first. Early Man. Yeah, we're off to an interesting start. Obviously, this isn't a Wallace and Gromit film, but what if I told you it kind of is? Because there are cameos from not one, but two Wallace and Gromit characters in this, in multiple forms as well. For example, Wallace is seen in this football crowd, and Feathers is seen as a cave painting. I'll come back to this later, we need a bit more world building before I can explain this properly. The one that started it all, Wallace and Gromit ran out of cheese and are bored on a bank holiday, so go and sample the moon, where they meet a sentient cooker for some reason who yearns for the Alps. I'm not going to plot recap all of these, I don't know why I explained that, there's just not that much to say at this point. We're only 2 things in, there's not much analysis that can really be done yet. Although with that said, one thing that does bear mentioning is the fact that in the Aardman-produced episode of Star Wars Visions, there is an in-person cameo from the cooker from A Grand Day Out, so clearly at some point he was... either before or after the events of A Grand Day Out, he was abducted and ended up with some Star Wars characters. So that means Star Wars goes on the timeline. Next up we have the short test animation of Wallace that Nick Park made before he made A Grand Day Out. When I said nothing was off the table, I really mean nothing is off the table. All this consists of is him basically walking around a little bit and moving his hands. So for the sake of this, we can just say he just did this after they got back in the rocket. Maybe he's waving up to Gromit in the window of the rocket before he got out after shutting everything down. And while we're at it, if you want, you can also count the initial Gromit test animation. Obviously, this looks nothing like him, but this can just be irrelevant footage of another dog that also exists in this universe. In fact, according to this website that I found, there's at least some speculation that this dog also appears on the board of police stuff in Vengeance Most Foul. So that's something. Ed Miliband. Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Yep, you heard me. It also feels a bit weird to me to put it this early, but that's where it works best. Putting this here does beg a few questions, like why does Hutch say Wallace quotes that he's not said yet?
Oh, I do like a bit of gorgonzola.
Oh, I do like a bit of gorgonzola.
The bounce has gone from his bungee.
The bounce has gone from his bungee.
Which we have to just kind of explain away as he's just saying random things that Wallace would happen to say later. Or there's some kind of string theory going on. I don't know. Could be that. Star Wars is already in this timeline. There's less believable stuff has happened. There is a deleted scene where Wallace makes reference to previously being a window cleaner.
We used to clean your windows, but now we're not so keen, 'cause catching pests is much more fun than keeping windows clean.
But there's also like 3 different alternate ending deleted scenes, one of which involves Hutch driving a motorized Marrow-mobile into Yorkshire, and there's of course the pre-CGI'd out rabbit ears Wallace when the original version had him still have them in this scene. A horrible way of explaining that, but you get the point. So unfortunately, I don't think we can count deleted scenes, because those things can't really coexist. Although, with that said, this film is our first introduction to what I call the most boring multiverse in history, which isn't actually a multiverse. I'm considering it timelines, because, and that's not the same thing as a multiverse, but that name just rolls off the tongue better. Because in the original British dub, does that count as the original? I think it does. But it is a DreamWorks production, so arguably the American dub is the original. I'm not sure. In the British dub of this film, Wallace correctly calls Gromit Marrow a marrow.
How is that prize marrow of yours coming on? Must be a while since you measured it.
But for some reason, in the American dub, he calls it a melon.
How is that prize melon of yours coming on? Must be a while since you measured it.
So, there is an alternate timeline going on here where Wallace is confused about the difference between melons and marrows, but nothing else is different as far as I can tell. Although, actually, now that we've established that's a thing, that's where we can put the deleted scenes. And also the game adaptation, which follows the same plot, but not exactly, so it can't technically be just a retelling of the same events because it is a bit different. This works okay. So I guess, however the events differed in whichever deleted scenes timeline the window cleaning thing happened in, I guess they'd done window cleaning already in that timeline. Also, side note, why are Wallace's human footprints in this film so narrow and almost realistic when his feet are, brace yourselves for this image, these absolute bricks? This film is actually our first appearance of Feathers McGraw, who appears on the roof of Tottington Hall in one shot of a scene towards the end of the film. YouTube user Alfie6274 proposes that he's robbing the Tottington Hall estate while everyone is distracted by the festivities of the vegetable competition, which is something that I hadn't considered but now entirely believe. It's also fitting that he's notably not wearing his classic chicken disguise, as this could be his first foray into crime. In fact, I reckon it's not a completely illogical leap to assume that he got caught in the act while he was in the rooftop garden conservatory thing, and in a panic grabbed the nearest thing he could to use as a disguise, which happened to be a red rubber glove among the various gardening tools. There is a sign on Wendeling's wool shop in a close shave advertising the sale of red gloves, but there's no evidence that the only person to ever own a red glove in this universe is Feathers, so they could have just been bought by someone else. Maybe even Lady Tottington to replace the one that was stolen by Feathers. Nick Park must have just really liked the idea of a prize marrow, because there's some weird accidental continuity here, with a marrow preserved on the wall of the dining room in a glass case in the wrong trousers and a bunch of other bits of Wallace and Gromit media. At first I thought that this was an issue, because obviously at the end of Were-Rabbit, Gromit goes flying into the back of it, but then I realised that he only damages this one side, technically. So if Wallace could whip up some kind of preserve-o-matic, which I think is completely within the grounds of realism, which he could use to, prevent it from moulding, they could easily clean it up and mount it on the wall facing non-impaled side out. Also, turns out from something we'll discuss later, it's actually stuffed, so what we're dealing with here is a taxidermy marrow. Or melon, depending on which timeline you're in. Oh yeah, also, when I say that this entry is for Curse of the Were-Rabbit, what I actually mean is it's like the first 45 minutes of Curse of the Were-Rabbit, because for some reason we now have to shoehorn this in. This is a brief animation of Gromit wielding a lightsaber, which has never been properly released beyond people recording it off the screen that it was being showed on at some Star Wars related event that I can't remember off the top of my head and I didn't write in the script. But for some reason they animated it on the background of the scene just after they go under the tunnel and the big fake rabbit is whipped off the top by the low bridge. So the only way we can explain this is that somewhere between these two shots, Gromit just had a lightsaber and waved it around a bit just for a laugh while he was waiting for Wallace to come back, and then got back in the car and carried on. Look, I didn't say this was perfect. Then we have the rest of the movie as nature intended. Following directly on from this, we have the PG Tips advert, which is a pretty simple entry. Lady Tottington comes over for a cup of tea, Wallace tries to test the temperature of it, and fails, quite frankly. You know what, this is getting too much already. I need to go and sit down and watch TV for a minute. Time to watch some TV like it's 2005. You know what, now let's play some games.
We need at least 15 new designs from Lola.
To get into puzzles and games. Just
Star Day Pass. The same or allotment to get to the next level and more new gadgets.
Alright, I'm clearly not going to be able to escape this, I was just going to get on with it. The Sky Gamestar exclusive Were-Rabbit game. If you're not British like me, or you didn't have the pleasure of having Sky back in the day.
Famously, Sky TV. So that was something that we never had growing up.
Sky is a satellite TV provider over here who used to have a bunch of fairly basic but also kind of cool interactive features like messaging, email and banking, pizza delivery, and even some games.
Play loads of games for only £1. Press interactive and select new Sky Gamestar.
What are you doing?
Over the years, these dwindled until kind of the mid to late 2010s, by which point Sky Active was nothing more than a shop, quite literally, and the games and such were completely deceased, despite some remnants of the services still being at the bottom of the TV guide in the Sky Q app in 2018, but only if you somehow managed to get into it while the box was in standby, but the app still let you in somehow or something. It was a weird set of circumstances that led me to finding this. I digress completely. The point is, there was a Were-Rabbit game on this service, and while we do have the full OST for it, the only footage of the actual game itself we have is this.
Or allotment to get to the next level and more new gadgets. Select.
Which comes from this little preview window on the homepage of the Sky Gamestar service. Based on the very, very brief bits of gameplay we can see here, we hear a narrator explaining how the game worked, and from what I can gather, you'd progress through different vegetable plots, presumably catching rabbits, and as you went through, it would get harder and you'd unlock more and more things. Based on this information, this could be set just in the general vicinity of Were-Rabbit, just following the day-to-day antics of the Anti-Pesto service. But then if, like, the final boss is the Were-Rabbit or something, we'd have to relegate it to the most boring multiverse in history, is what I would say, except after I wrote all of that, I then remembered that at some point in the last few years, someone managed to get in contact with Denki, the developer of all of these games, and they've been slowly re-releasing them as browser games in their original forms. And sure enough, this one is one of them, and is fully playable. But sadly, what that does mean is we can confirm that this has to be relegated to the multiverse, because it does directly. You have to like collect bits of the Mind-O-Matic at one point, and the Were-Rabbit is involved. Sadly, it's in one of the other timelines. We can't say it's directly canon based solely on ignorance after all. DFS, the Great Sofa Caper. Alright, our first DFS advert, the one that randomly brought back Lady Tottington despite Were-Rabbit being like 17 years old when this advert was made. I don't know, that just seemed strange. Wallace tries to make her a new sofa with technology, and it's a hideous beast, so Gromit shows them the wonders of the handcrafted sofas of DFS. Rex the Runt. Wait, what? I'd never actually heard of this Aardman show before when I started this project. When I first saw it, all my brain went to was the National Accident Helpline dog. But according to the Aardman wiki, and I don't know why I said that last over here, you can see it right here, Wallace makes a cameo as a window cleaner in this. So I think that episode goes here, and then the rest of the show just kind of takes place like around this general kind of area From what I've seen, this show is also quite self-aware and fourth wall breaky, so I think it's probably safer to assume that it's a show within the universe, and Wallace is in it because there was an opening for a small appearance of a window cleaner character, and he auditioned for it just for a laugh because he is one at this point. Spoilers for the film that's coming next. But then there is a problem with this, because in another episode of this show there is a book called, what's it called? Yeah, it's an Aardman book called Cracking Animation, which features Wallace and Morph. And I do have an explanation for this, but I'll have to talk about it way later because it relies on a bunch of stuff we've not talked about yet. Also, presumably at some point between the end of Were Rabbit and where we are now, Feathers must have been caught for his robbery of the Tottington estate and arrested for the first time. Presumably the first time. I mean, he could have had an illustrious life of crime before this point, but first time in the timeline. A Close Shave, another one of the classic original three, and the introduction of Shaun the Sheep. This film also notably includes a very similar contraption for getting Wallace out of bed in the morning to that in Were Rabbit, which implies it's to be in the same general vicinity. And interestingly, this is also our second appearance of Feathers, who is now back out of prison again, as we see him either scaling up or working his way down this cliff face. I'd never noticed this before. He's hard to see, but he's there. We also know he's been arrested before this, and we can assume between these two, because in the cell that Gromit is kept in, we can see graffiti on the wall that says Feathers was here. This is shortly followed up by the N-Power loft insulation ad, in which Wallace, inspired by the recent sheep shenanigans, is inspired to insulate the loft of the West Wallaby Street house using sheep, although he apparently uses a different type of sheep because they all look noticeably different to every other Aardman sheep. I don't know why they made completely new sheep just for this advert. I guess the usual sheep were too expensive to hire just for this advert. DFS Grand Comfort Sale. Wallace is back at it again, trying to design a new sofa after Lady Tottington turned the first one down, only now there's sheep about as well. It's also the normal sheep again, and that N-Power advert is literally the only time we ever see that other type of sheep, so we can just assume that the two types of sheep are always together, but the other type are usually just off screen, and on this one occasion, all of the normal sheep were just off screen. We'll just tell ourselves that. It's okay. The Jules Christmas advert from 2018 or something? I'm not sure. It's Christmas, and Wallace sets up some decorations. That's all there is to this one. DFS A Comfy Carol. It's another DFS advert, and it's still Christmas, and Wallace takes advantage of the fact that there's still sheep around to make a mechanical sheep-based Christmas Carol machine to the delight of the locals, who invite them in for a drink and a mince pie. The Sumitomo Life advert. This is one of those Japanese adverts I was talking about, that wasn't a joke, in which we see Wallace and the sheep on the bike again, like they were in A Close Shave. I considered putting this in the most boring multiverse in history as an alternate version of the events of A Close Shave, but I think I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to consider that he's considering turning this into some kind of performance that he could put on like a live show to people, and he's trying to practice. I reckon that's what's happening here. Shopper 13. This is our first one, isn't it? Yeah, this is our first of the Cracking Contraptions shorts, in which Wallace builds a machine to go and get cheese for him from the shops, without paying for it, mind you. And it almost succeeds up until the very last hurdle, at which point they deploy Shaun to try and reel it in, only for Shaun to start eating the cheese instead. Now, I reckon Shaun eating this cheese is the final straw for Wallace, which causes him to evict all the sheep and send them back out into the fields to fend for themselves. Shaun keeps the jumper, but other than that, they've all been sent back out to the farmland. Well, that banishment doesn't last long, because next up we have one of the Glico adverts, which is another Japanese advert, this time for this pudding. So we see that Shaun is living out in the fields, but his superhuman hearing hears that Wallace and Gromit are opening up some of these puddings, and he really wants one, so he races back to the house and steals it, and is promptly kicked back out again, I assume. But I think when he's kicked out of spite, he steals something from the basement. We'll get back to that in a minute. Curse of the Ramsbottoms. Ramsbottom is Wendoline's surname, by the way.
Ramsbottom. Wendoline Ramsbottom.
Oh, charming.
This is our first of the graphic novels, which I've not read in its entirety, but I know that it's something that it comes back up in a later entry, so it has to go here. There are also graphic novel adaptations of the original shorts, which I forgot to print out cards for, but we can assume that they go in the most boring multiverse in history, because they'll just be very slightly different in a couple of ways, retellings of the events of them. Crackers in Space. This is another graphic novel, which is also one of the ones of those that have accompanying audiobooks, which is the one that it's the one that ties into the events of the last one. How do I even explain this? Essentially, Wallace, Gromit, Wendelin, and some new characters go into space to stop a cheese asteroid, which was put up there by mistake because Wallace is really bad at reading instructions. That's pretty much the plot. Wallace references in this the fact that he's not been to space since the bank holiday, so this has to be after a grand day out, obviously, because they build the rocket in the grand day out. I don't know why I even pointed that out, but also means it has to come before the VR one, which we'll get to in a minute, because they use the rocket again in that. So this has to be set before the Grand Getaway and an entry after that, which we'll get to, but of course after A Close Shave, because the plot, it has Wendelin in it. Oh, and also it's Gromit's birthday, just like in The Wrong Trousers, and it's revealed to be in February, which surprisingly does actually correlate with the calendar in The Wrong Trousers. And this book also implies that Wallace hasn't been paying for his TV license.
Hello, who is it?
It's all right, Wallace. Haven't come to burgle your brie and biscuits. It's only me from next door.
Oh, I'm glad it's you, Mr. Patel.
Austerity cornflakes and Latvian feta.
Come in. We were afraid it might be someone from the BBC.
Oh, no. I haven't come about your TV licence. Though obviously I had to report it if it weren't in order under the 1943 Wireless and Telecommunications Act, as amended in 1954 and 1967. No!
So, if we want to start a list, if we want to go the full Quinton here and start a list of crimes, cheese theft, not paying for a TV license, and we know that he does watch TV, because we see it in a couple of other places, although that does line up quite well with the fact that they constantly have a bunch of unpaid bills. It's all just the BBC license, man. I'm going to say that if there's an audiobook version of a graphic novel, it overrules the graphic novel itself in terms of canonicity to the main timeline, and because I assume the audiobooks are a bit more descriptive than the visual novels because it doesn't have illustrations to provide extra context, that they are slightly different, so then the book counterparts to the graphic novels, to the audiobooks, can be relegated to the multiverse. I need to print off some more cards. I admit that I am doing that entirely because I don't own and haven't read the graphic novels, and therefore don't know that there's not some minor visual thing that would break its placement here were I to actually count that blindly. So there's slight bit of insurance there. One of the characters does paint Go Faster stripes on the rocket in this, but we can assume that they were repainted back to just orange for old time's sake at some point after this, between here and when we next see the rocket. Plots in Space. This is another graphic novel, which I've put here because it presumably also involves space and the rocket, and might even have the Go Faster stripes on it. I don't know, but it definitely can't be before that because of the bank holiday thing. The Grand Getaway, the VR one, in which you take on the role of Wallace's robotic golf club caddy on a trip back to the moon, which doesn't go quite as expected after Wallace gets the dates wrong on his holiday trip plans. I reckon this whole expedition inspires Wallace and Gromit to go back to the moon again not that long after this, and this time take with them more Japanese Glico puddings. Yes, we've got another one of these adverts in which they've returned to the moon in the original rocket for another picnic, this time with a mini fridge full of the puddings. I believe some or all of these were actually lost media for a time, so it's nice that they were found. It's also here where we see what I think Sean stole before he was kicked out after he ate that other pudding last time. These are great. Brief side note here for a second. What's going on with the continents in? So that's an interesting fact. The continents are of vastly different shapes in this universe. Next up, we have the actual final one of these adverts that I hadn't seen until super late into writing this, so I'm glad I found it. In this one, Wallace and Gromit and a bunch of the sheep are all just straight up vibing. So I reckon Sean told the rest of the flock how good these puddings were, and so they've all come back to the house and stowed away inside various pieces of furniture, ready to spring out like this when the time comes for them to have more pudding. Also notably, the duo have now made front page news with the product, so I assume they got some publicity after they took them to the moon. So after this, I reckon all of the sheep went back to the fields, concluding our sheep arc. Kind of. I mean, I tried to divide this into arcs, but it's a little bit, it's not a perfect system. It's quite vague. Okay, next up we've got another pair of N-Power adverts. New boiler and widescreen. Now entirely sheep-free, the pair get a new boiler and a bunch of TVs put together, and then a horrifying energy bill. And this one also ends with the implication that all of the TVs are in some way sentient or haunted, which is just something that never comes up again, and we're just going to have to accept, process, and move on from. Alright, next up, quickfire round. We've got World of Invention, the BBC One Christmas idents, but not the 2024 ones, the ones from like 2012, 8, 10, somewhere in that vicinity. The BBC Two Christmas idents from the 90s, and the 2024 Strictly Come Dancing Terms and Conditions bit. This is what I'm considering kind of the BBC arc, which is ironic considering we know Wallace isn't paying his TV license, but not to worry. World of Invention is presented as being broadcast live from the West Wallaby Street basement, and Wallace is very much aware that he's on TV and is the presenter of it. So I think the only way to make this fit is for Wallace to have been contracted by the in-universe BBC to present this documentary series because of his notability as a local inventor who was recently on the news for taking some Japanese puddings to space. And to go along with it, he's built a giant BBC One logo in his basement. The branding of the microphone on the presenter desk does kind of imply that they've got their own channel, but I can't count half the stuff that I've counted here and then not count the giant BBC One logo in the basement. And also, actually, they explicitly talk about the BBC website in the end credits.
If you've enjoyed our show, grab your mouse and log on to our World of Invention website. bbc.co.uk/Wallace and Gromit.
So, there's that. I did originally have this quite a bit later on, but at one point Wallace does say, imagine that, when talking about a robot that does home chores, and I feel like he wouldn't say that if this was happening in a time period where Norbot existed, because he very much can do household chores, and he definitely isn't keeping Norbot a secret from the world, so he'd have no reason to just lie about it. I then moved it up to after the wrong trousers, but before Vengeance Most Foul, but then noticed that at one point Gromit uses the teapot. The teapot causes a lot of problems in this, you'll come to see, which obviously cannot be used between Wrong Trousers and Vengeance Most Foul, otherwise the entire premise of Vengeance Most Foul falls apart, and thus it has made its way all the way up here. I'm going to have to move these lines closer together. We still have this many more cards to go through. This is also the first time we see Wallace's invention, LAD, or LAD, which is an invention of Wallace's for general assistance purposes, who's arguably kind of a very early stage prototype for what would eventually become Norbot, you could argue. I do realise that saying that this is canon, I was going to say implies, it doesn't imply, it directly means that real biological humans exist in this universe. I guess plasticine people and animals are just like a subspecies of human in this universe, and they just kind of maybe live in separate physical areas of the country. The rocket also makes another appearance here, although the door is now down here instead of near the top. So they presumably did more work on it and changed it around a bit at some point, potentially inspired by the makeshift door the cooker made to try and make it mildly more convenient to get in. Or maybe this is actually a second edition of the rocket, although the same inspiration could still have been true for the door thing. Either way, Wallace accidentally sets it off and blows it up during the course of this show. Also, Wallace's grandmother is momentarily mentioned in this show.
My old gran used to say, Wallace, you've got no sense, you daft ape.
Which is the only time any other member of the Wallace dynasty is ever mentioned at all, as far as I've noticed. And you'd think I'd have noticed. This video's how long? This might potentially be who it is that we see in the framed photo in the wrong trousers, or maybe this other photo from the credits of Vengeance, which I think has also been up in the house somewhere else at some point. It looks familiar, I'm not 100% sure. I've bundled in, I don't know why I put these all on at once, I'm talking about them separately. I bundled these idents into this BBC arc because unlike the 2024 ones, they're self-aware as being idents with sentient BBC Two logos bouncing around, and this. And Wallace exclaiming via the voices of both Peter Sellis and Ben Whitehead, and possibly also someone else.
We're on BBC One.
So I assume in universe they were just contracted to do these idents after the success of the World of Invention show. And to top all of that off, they were then also asked to read out the terms and conditions on Strictly. Then there's also this little snippet.
Cracking cause, lad. Let's do our bit.
Which I really struggled to find the original source of after I saw it in IsaacTings' Wallace and Gromit iceberg video that I watched to see if I'd missed anything, and I eventually tracked it down through a reverse image search of a screenshot of it being from the end of a promotional video for a charity baking event from 2016. So that basically still works here. They, as part of this, like, being in the public eye kind of arc, they were asked to promote a charity and did so by saying one sentence. Alright, hold on. I need to seriously remodel here. Am I going to have enough board space at all, even if I shift everything up slightly? This bit will be very satisfying. You'll import all of this into Final Cut and be like, oh, there's so much stuff. This is going to take me forever to edit. And then you'll find this bit, which is probably going to be 10 straight minutes of me moving yarn around, and you'll be like, yes, I can cut that out, big chunk in one go off. I know what I'm like. Alright, there we go. While I was sorting out all of these cards to print out, which took forever, by the way, there's a lot of these, I found this board game, and as it sports the World of Invention branding, I see no reason why this shouldn't be a product that canonically exists in universe as a tie-in to the World of Invention show. If there are any other products like these, they can also fit in the same way. Okay, the Bullyproof Vest and the 525? Yeah, Cracker Vac. These are two more of the Cracking Contraptions shorts in which Wallace builds a self-defense vest and tests it on Gromit, and an automatic vacuum cleaner for cracker crumbs which goes awry. These two of these shorts are here specifically for reasons that will become clear later. Play with Earn. This is mostly lost media, and I actually have two other entire videos talking about my failed mostly attempts to find it, but essentially it's a flash game where you have to create the perfect cup of tea from the contents within a sentient fridge that is presumably an invention of Wallace's. It was posted to the PG Tips Tea website in 2005 as part of their collaboration that brought us that advert, and also the Gromit mug. Everybody wants a Gromit mug. And also this tea caddy. I've put this here because I think this is kind of the start of Wallace experimenting with tea making inventions to eventually replace the teapot that they've been using throughout all of this, which is obviously a plot point of Vengeance Most Foul. Alright, strap in, you're not ready for this next one. Unless you are. I don't know how much of a Wallace and Gromit fan you are personally, you might have read this all the time. The Lost Slipper. This is another graphic novel / audiobook in which Wallace misplaces a slipper. What is his solution to that problem, you might ask? Brace yourselves. Wallace invents a time machine out of a grandfather clock in an attempt to go back in time to after their 11s to retrieve the slipper from the last point in time that he remembered having it, but accidentally ends up going on a romp through history instead. He also randomly just pulls a Beverly Hillbillies and discovers oil in the front garden, and some ancient ruins or something.
Oh, hello, Gromit. Look what I've dug up. A Roman villa, a cache of Elizabethan silver, and, oh, an oil well. But no comfy carpet slipper.
Which he just then, seemingly, apparently, presumably is so distracted by the time machine plan that he just completely forgets about and never thinks to take advantage of at all to, pay for his TV license. What's it called? A story about a man named Jeb. Poor man near birth gets finally fed, and then one day he was shooting at some food, and from the ground was crude oil. That is, it doesn't say what it is. I'm trying to think of what the right word is for the thing of oil coming out of the ground. It's fine. I don't know why I know the words to the Beverly Hillbillies theme song. But then again, in Trousers, the moon cheese stocks are soaring, and he's not taking advantage of that either, so maybe he's just an idiot. I really feel like on the kind of inciting incident conflicts to proposed solution ratio, this one is quite extreme. But you know what that finally explains? How Wallace is in Early Man. I heard about this Early Man cameo quite a while before I started planning this video, and I was planning on explaining it when I first started writing this by just being like, yeah, Wallace is always up to something, he's always making some wacky invention, it's not completely out of the question that he just invented a time machine at some point, but I don't even have to theorise, this is undoubtedly canon. But he's not the only cameo in Early Man, as we discussed, because during the end credits we see a cave painting of Feathers McGraw in his chicken disguise. You could argue that Feathers stole Wallace's time machine at some point, or stowed away while Wallace was going back on his various other romps through history, which led to this cameo. But I feel like if he did that, he'd be going for much bigger targets than the local museum's Blue Diamond, and the alternate timeline situation would be a lot more messed up than it is. I was going to say that I think Feathers doesn't know about the time machine at all, and Wallace went back too early to the time of Early Man at some point later on and just told the locals some of his wacky stories, and either did paintings himself to kind of illustrate what he was saying, or they did illustrations of what he was saying to visualize it. But then I realized there is actually a physical cameo of Feathers McGraw as well. It's not just the cave painting. Although I still think it's a reasonable idea to assume that Wallace came back from a later point and told everyone there about his stories, and either he or they did illustrations of it. Which could also explain could also bring in the teaser image for Early Man even, although that does also have Chicken Run characters on it. It's alright. So I reckon when Wallace took the trip back to the time of Early Man, Feathers stowed away in the time machine with him and just kind of went for a bit of a look around to see if there was anything he could do before stowing back in the time machine and coming back again at some point. The reason that I put this here is that they're still getting post via model train at the start of this, like they are in The Wrong Trousers.
I definitely had a full set this morning because they were both on the 1106 Sitting Room Express, which delivered the mail.
Although there is a bit of a glaring issue, I'm not going to lie. During the events of this book, they meet an Egyptian cat who plays chess with Gromit and stows away with them when they come back to the present day, and it's strongly implied that they're going to keep the cat.
Why, it's little Kitty. She must have stowed away when we nipped into the pyramids. I warn you, Gromit, you'll have to do something about your chess if she's staying.
There is a cat noise in the bully-proof vest. So I thought, maybe that's the cat, and this is set after this. But Wallace seems alarmed by the cat noise. Like, he's not... I feel like if he was used to hearing cat noises, he wouldn't seem that unnerved by it. The way I see it, there's 3 potential solutions to this. Number 1, the cat died. We're not going with that one. 2, the cat could have done that cat thing and just decided to move to a different house, which they just do sometimes. Or 3, Wallace invented some kind of machine that detected the existence of the most boring multiverse in history, and he was stressed out by this, thinking, oh wait lad, have we broken the space-time continuum? And decides to try and fix it by mitigate any other issues by taking the cat back to ancient Egypt. I think that's probably the best one we've got, to be honest. Even if he didn't find evidence of the other timelines, maybe he just had a bit of a Doc Brown Back to the Future 2 moment and didn't want anything to do with time travel anymore, just in case something went horribly wrong, and just decided the potential dangers of time travel outweigh the benefits. Next up, The Wrong Trousers and the flashbacky bits from Vengeance Most Foul. Based on this chronology, this would actually be technically the second time that Feathers has ever seen Gromit, and if this lengthy pause in facial expression doesn't say, aren't you that dog I saw flying a sidecar up a cliff, then I don't know what does. Also, it's interesting to note that the front door has a cat flap in it, almost as if there'd been a cat around recently or something. We know from the flashbacks in Vengeance Most Foul that after catching Feathers in the milk bottle and subsequently tying him up, Wallace and Gromit phone the police, specifically Peter Kay, and while they're doing so, Feathers manages to switch out the bagged Blue Diamond for a nearby turnip. I don't know why I put emphasis on I said blue diamond with weird emphasis, and hides the diamond in the teapot. They then have the techno trousers haul him off to the police station, and the police then subsequently have him sentenced and sent to the zoo to be locked up. It's also the dead of night when the whole train chase and calling the police situation happens, so either it was so late that it was nearly the morning anyway, or they kept Feathers in the house overnight until the next day when they then took him to the police. This, of course, is why I put Ern before it, because in the time between Wallace and Gromit having this cup of tea while phoning the police and whenever their next cup of tea was made, Wallace must have made, or at least finish off, the tea-making contraption from Vengeance and retired the teapot to the shelf, otherwise he or Gromit would have almost definitely come across the diamond. Except, in the penultimate shot of the film, there it is! Okay, right. Alright, no matter what I do here, it's going to feel like a stretch, but I've been written into an absolute corner here. It's an objective canonical fact that the diamond is, at this moment, in that teapot. There's no getting out of that, so we're just going to have to work with it. Here's what I propose. Between the shot of Gromit looking out of the window and the next shot of the two of them with the teapot and the cheese between them, there's several minutes of time. Enough for Gromit to actually get the cheese and the tea out and bring them in, and for the trousers to topple over the bin, get back up, and then start walking off into the sunset. What I'm choosing to believe happened in those few minutes is Gromit put the kettle on, Wallace heard the kettle, and got up and went into the kitchen to remind Gromit about the new tea-making machine that he'd just recently finished in the time since the last cup of tea before they took Feathers to the police station. Once in there and firing up the machine, Gromit seems a bit disappointed that he was being kind of replaced, and in response, Wallace said something along the lines of, "Oh, cheer up, lad, here you go. We can still bring the teapot in with us for old time's sake," and the two of them went back into the living room with the cheese and the tea tray, with tea made by the machine and the teapot just there for the vibes. Still with the diamond in it, but neither of them have opened it, so neither of them have noticed. At some point a bit after this, Wallace fully retires the teapot, either sticking it up on the top shelf or putting it in a cupboard for a bit and then putting it on the top shelf, doesn't really matter. Point is, out of commission. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's the least stretchy set of circumstances I can come up with given what we're working with here. Now, these flashbacks are also the reason for some of the stuff that I said I'd explain later. As discussed, we see in Vengeance that Feathers had the diamond hidden in the teapot the entire time, meaning that any time we see the teapot used, it cannot be between Trousers and Vengeance in the timeline. Jumping ahead a little bit, the next few installments include the rest of the Cracking Contraptions shorts, which I put down here because I think they're the start of Wallace's push to inventions for as many things as humanly possible, which we see at the start of Vengeance Most Foul. However, a few of those shorts do feature the teapot being used, so I had to move those ones further forward along the timeline, and Shopper 13 had Sean in it, so that had to go in the sheep arc. This film is also another appearance of the most boring multiverse in history, because the original broadcast and VHS release version, and also possibly an accidental later TV broadcast in 2007, have different songs in a few places because of copyright-related issues. SomeBoiOnline, again, actually has a video about that if you want more detail about that situation. Oh yeah, actually, on the topic of other dubs of the original 3 shorts, there are actually 3 quite rare redubs of the first 3 shorts, which have simplified dialogue for the purposes of teaching English. I don't know if to children or as a second language or what, but yeah, those are things that exist where the dialogue it's the same film, but the dialogue recorded by Peter Sallis, who apparently had no idea what he was doing and was incredibly confused. I read that somewhere.
It's no use prevaricating about the bush. Oh, I can't pay these bills. The joke's over. Get me out of these. Lummy day. Gromit, where are you? Help me! I can't stop them! Help!
So yeah, they're just other branches of the most boring multiverse in history, I suppose. Grand Adventures, Fright of the Bumblebees, The Last Resort, Muzzle, and The Bogeyman, all of which are Telltale games in which Wallace and Gromit accidentally create a swarm of enormous bees when attempting to upsize their honey business, turn their basement into a holiday resort, and solve an almost murder, foil a man committing charitable fraud and using dogs as free labour, and stop another man from turning the entire town into a golf course. Also, Wallace nearly gets married by accident. I haven't actually played all of the games in full, but the Techno Trousers do make an appearance, carrying golf clubs, which is why this is where it is. They must have walked back home at some point, or the pair tracked them down to repurpose them, since it was admittedly a bit of a waste just throwing them away since
those presents weren't cheap.
Arachnophobia. This is another audiobook/visual novel, although admittedly it's not quite as insane as the other one. Although it does feature Wallace being hypnotized into believing he is and acting like a dog, so there's that.
So that when I click my fingers, you leap into your dog basket
The plot is set into motion initially by Wallace attempting to make a ping pong machine as well, which fits nicely with his gradual descent into being more over-reliant on inventions around this time. Also, Gromit owns a hotel by the end of this.
It's the key to the hotel. I got the reward, and he can have my hotel. If anyone can run this place single-handed, it's him.
Which is interesting, but I think we can just assume he sold it to help with their constant financial issues, even though they've still done nothing with the gushing oil in the front garden or the Roman ruins or the cheese stocks, but whatever. This also features the destruction of the glass cabinet containing the marrow, which is also how we know it's stuffed, because it's said specifically.
Oh no! It hit me prized giant marrow in presentation glass case. It cost a fortune to have that marrow stuffed.
Although Wallace does refer to it as being his, specifically, and not Gromit's. But to be fair, a ping pong machine is destroying the man's living room. He's not thinking straight. He probably just misspoke. It's fine. Not to be confused with Great Adventures, Grand Adventure. They're really just running out of synonyms for a grand day out at this point. Yeah, this is a TV advert for just holidays in the UK as a concept, as far as I can tell. It's a bit of a got milk situation. It's not advertising a specific brand or whatever, it's just advertising the general concept, and features Wallace building a cannon to fire the pair to their destination before it goes wrong, and Gromit suggests they go on a normal holiday in the country instead, before showing a series of photos of them at various locations. I originally considered the possibility that this could be set before a grand day out, all the way back up here, with the pair deciding against holidaying in the UK and looking for alternative options again before choosing to go to the moon, but then that doesn't really work because of the photos at the end implying that they did stick to the plan of going on a UK holiday around the entire country, apparently. I then considered the possibility of this being set just before the VR one, with the holiday Wallace gets the dates wrong on at the start of that being the one they decided on for this particular trip after Gromit suggested the UK holidays brochure here. But then a spanner was thrown into the works with that as well, because in the second audiobook, Wallace explicitly states that he's never been to Scotland.
And his face did seem vaguely familiar, but I can't have met him because Gromit and me haven't been to Scotland.
Despite the fact that this is one of the photos seen at the end of this advert. You could argue that the main bit of the advert is pre the VR one. I don't know why I can never remember its name, the Grand Getaway. And then all of these photos are just like spread out over the course of the general area of like other holidays that they've been on. But I think it's easier just assume that it's all here and then assume that they went on a grand tour of the entire country over the course of the next few weeks or so. This could also potentially be the holiday where Wallace has this atrocious cheese lollipop from one of the Radio Times covers. I'm trying to not talk about photo shoots like these specifically because for the most part they could just kind of go anywhere, but that just fits quite nicely. Although a skit from Comic Relief 2007. We see Gromit in the background of a shot in a dog pound here. I reckon at some point while on their tour of the country they ended up getting separated and Gromit ended up in the pound for a bit until Wallace tracked him down and got him out. Alright, bit of a quick fire round. The Auto Chef, the Turbo Diner, the Christmas Card-O-Matic, a Snowmanatron, the Radio Times Christmas 2024 promotional clip, the Telescope and the Snoozatron. Interjection, I'm an idiot. The teapot is clearly there in the telescope, so this isn't here. This is back up with the 525 Crackerback and the Bullyproof Vest. This is the rest of the Cracking Contraption shorts and this brief Radio Times promotional clip from 2024.
Lots of lovely stuff delivered to your door, eh, Gromit?
Wallace makes a cooking machine, a more advanced cooking machine, a Christmas card making machine, a snowman making machine, and a sleep assistance machine. I think this is all part of Wallace's descent into being too over-reliant on his inventions. There's a Sean test card in the telescope, which I assume he put in there himself. I put them in this order because the two food-based ones are notably set on the same day, and the big roast style of the meal that he puts on in the Turbo Diner, that's it, is Christmas-esque, so maybe he's preparing for Christmas. Then it is Christmas in these three, and then there's a bit of time left after Christmas to lead us back into kind of the summery kind of time, ready for Red Nose Day 2024. Yeah, we're not quite at Vengeance yet. Wallace has built a machine for making both T-shirts, TPs, teeth, and golf tees, very much in line with his tea machine skills in Vengeance Most Foul. Sean, Timmy, and Morph are also in this. I mean, Sean's come back around before, maybe he's just popping over for a visit, and Morph could be as well, because Morph does come up in this a bit later, spoilers, so that's not completely unrealistic. Another interjection, there's also this Jamtastic VR/AR game which I had seen, but I thought it was just like a tutorial or bonus minigame level in the Grand Getaway. But it isn't, and it can go in here as like a test run of just a new invention as part of the becoming too over-dependent on inventions kind of character arc. 2 hours and 10 minutes? Are we even halfway? I don't know if we're halfway. I'm not sure. The rest of Vengeance Most Foul. As of now, the latest installment in the franchise, unless you count the Feathers McGraw Traitors teaser, in which Feathers hacks into Wallace's smart gnome and seeks revenge, smashing the teapot and revealing the blue diamond within, which Wallace hadn't found because of his increasing reliance on his inventions for everything, as discussed with the previous few entries. In this film, we also see the van, again, back from Were-Rabbit, repainted and branded accordingly with Wallace and Norbot's gnome improvements. Now, there is quite a major issue with this, and that's Peter Kay's hair. On the face of it, it's alright. Back in Were-Rabbit, his moustache was black, now it's been ages and it's gone grey, but the problem is that when we see the flashbacks to the Trousers era in this film, he has more hair than he had even in Were-Rabbit. You could argue that this is evidence that Were-Rabbit can't be so absurdly far back in the timeline as I've put it, but regardless of where else you might try and put it, that then causes problems with the marrow on the wall. Sure, it could be a different marrow, but by that logic you could argue it's a different teapot. Where's the fun in that? The teapot is very prominent in Were-Rabbit, so it definitely can't be after Trousers, which is where it would have to be for the hair to work. So what's the solution here? The only real explanation I can come up with is that in the Were-Rabbit era, he'd been thinning a bit, and he decided to just shave it all but the moustache. Then by Trousers era, it had grown back enough for him to try a comb over, as you do. Then by the Vengeance era, he'd gone totally bald naturally. Is this a perfect explanation? No. Is this a better explanation than they own a second teapot which they use sometimes but not always? Yes. At the end of the film, we see that they've repaired their original teapot, but I don't think those repairs hold up for long, and they buy a replacement which looks the same, because it's in Loaf and Death, which I refuse to believe is before Vengeance Most Foul, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, and this film, of course, also features the cameos to end all cameos, which can only mean that I am out of pins. Hold on. Pins! I need a minute. I'm just editing this, and I've just realised that the turnip has been in the bag in the vault for many years, and it hasn't, like, moulded or anything. So maybe we don't need to presume that Wallace invented some kind of preserve-o-matic for the marrow on the wall. Maybe plasticine food just doesn't go off. I mean, we already know it's stuffed anyway, but still, you know. Okay, I'm back. I know I said I needed a minute. It's been about 24 hours. I had to go and supervise some fibre broadband being installed. That sounds a lot more important than it sounds like that's my job or something. So, as we know, in Vengeance Most Foul, there is the cameos to end all cameos, which can only mean one thing. Every piece of Shaun the Sheep media is happening kind of adjacently. It's a bit of a Star Wars situation. Its position on the timeline isn't really solid. It's just kind of happening vaguely in this general area. It's not that concrete. All just post-sheep arc after Shaun and the flock have been kicked out by Wallace for the final time. So we've already established that the plasticine population is a kind of subsection of just the population of this world. There's a subsection of that subsection who can only speak in grunts, and that is just something that we're going to have to accept once again and move on from. The first Shaun movie also shows that he grew up with the farmer, so he must have done that, then been rustled, ended up with Wallace and Gromit for a bit, and then worked his way back to the farmer after he was back out in the wilderness. There is a brief moment in an episode of Shaun the Sheep where the farmer's watching a cooking show, and it's reused footage from the start of Loaf and Death, but I think we can just assume that this is another cooking show with a shot that just happens to look pretty much the same. It could even be Baker Bob hosting the in-universe show, since he's a relatively well-known figure in the bakery world within this universe. Within the Shaun show, there's also a few other appearances of Gromit's likeness in various places, but I mean, we can just assume that Gromit is just what beagles look like within this within the plasticine bit of this universe, so these are just generic beagles. Same with the Gromit-shaped soap that we'll see in something later on. The first Shaun film also has a Feathers cameo on the printed out board of printed out photos of animals that the pest control guy has captured. So I think this happened, I know I said that these are happening just kind of in this general area, but I think this particularly happened a bit after Vengeance, but I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. This board also has cameos from animals from Creature Comforts in it, so, and also a character from the National Accident Helpline looking dogs, so presumably they ended up in this city at some point and got captured. In fact, maybe he was even the one who captured Gromit back in that Red Nose Day clip. And this is that same pound, which lines up with them going on their holiday around the country. They probably ended up in that city from the Shaun the Sheep movie. They got separated for a bit. Gromit ended up in the pound until Wallace managed to track him down and free him. And we see in the movie that if he loses an animal that he's captured, he subsequently takes the picture back off the board, which is why Gromit isn't on the board when we see it in the Shaun movie. But then there is a problem with this, because at the start of Farmageddon, A Grand Day Out is a film on the TV. I do have a theory, but I'll get to it in a minute. Preston's robotic arm also makes an appearance in this film very briefly, and given that when Wallace rebuilds Preston he doesn't use any of the original arm pieces, it's not completely illogical for it to have ended up in a trash can, which could have then subsequently ended up being abducted by aliens, which is how it ends up here. Also, does Farmageddon being in this bring that CompareTheMarket.com advert into this universe? I'm gonna say no. I don't think so. Not yet, anyway. Also, in the time since I recorded this, the announcement has come out about the third Shaun the Sheep feature film, and I'm not waiting until like October to release this video. As you could probably gather from the Severance reference at the start, I've already been working on this for quite some time, so hopefully it'll be relatively inconsequential and I can just cover it in a pinned comment. Fingers crossed. That Apple shot on iPhone Battersea Power Station film from Christmas 2024. It's Christmas again and the pair are decorating, and Feathers is once again at large after not being rearrested at the end of Vengeance. So actually, yeah, so probably 1 second. Alright, next entry is the Christmas 2024 BBC One idents. So just to this is why you don't go off script. Just to clarify here, Feathers is not arrested at the end of Vengeance. Shaun happens around this general time. Creature Comforts happens around this general time. It's Christmas and Feathers is still around. It's still Christmas. Then the little trailer for The Traitors, which follows on from one of these idents, shows that Feathers is still out and about, and he's broken into the West Wallaby Street house, in fact, in this particular instance. Then it's Shaun the Sheep the movie, when he gets caught by the pest control guy and arrested again. Then it's Farmageddon, which is irrelevant in terms of Feathers in this context. Then Project Zoo happens.
Will not be informed of the meaning of Project Zoo until the time is right for you to know the meaning of Project Zoo. Oh, right.
So in the time since Feathers was arrested by the animal control guy and shipped back off to the West Wallaby Zoo, he has now completely overthrown it and turned it into a diamond creation facility or mine or something along those lines. This should absolutely not be canon, but I refuse to be defeated. Anyway, Wallace and Gromit have at some point, since we last saw them, adopted a polar bear, who is part of Feathers' scheme to imprison zoo animals to run his diamond thing before he is eventually once again put behind bars. I mean, technically he was always in the zoo, so arguably he was behind bars the entire time. Does that count? Which shirt should I be wearing? I'm not sure. Well, he does come and go of his own accord, and he does basically run the place, so he let's say, for the sake of this, that he's essentially broken out again, and then at the end, he's back behind bars again. You may be wondering why I can't put this any earlier. I don't know why you'd be wondering that. I don't know why I wrote that like that, but either way, the reason I can't put it earlier is because they've got the kettle on the table at the start, which I know isn't the teapot, but I don't know why they'd always use a teapot apart from this one time when they'd have to just be going directly from kettle to cup with a tea bag in each cup. And if this was in the post-Trousers but pre-Vengeance era, I especially don't know why they'd be doing this instead of using one of the various tea machines that Wallace has been shown to have made. Wallace does say at the start of this that Feathers is supposed to be locked up, so we can just assume that the police kept him informed and let them know that Feathers was back in prison after he was caught by the pest control guy. Or actually, it just got news coverage again. It made headlines last time, so it probably would again. The marrow is on the wall again, which is So we're just going to have to assume that after the cabinet was destroyed in Anarachnophobia, Wallace just had it repaired again. So I think we're just going to accept that. And to be fair, even if we tried to put this somewhere else, we'd probably still end up having to assume that the marrow had just been repaired, because I wouldn't be surprised if it appears in what I'm about to talk about next. Catch of the day, The Whippet Vanishes, Appear Too Far, The Beautiful Game, and all of the newspaper comic strips. This is the rest of the graphic novels and the newspaper strips that I didn't know about until I started this, and I'm putting them here because there's a solid chance that at any point in any of them, there is some reference made to the original 3 films, and there is almost definitely appearances by the Teapot. So it has to be post-Trousers because references, but can't be pre-Vengeance because Teapot. Solid chance some of them feature the marrow, which is why we're going to have to assume that it was repaired after it got destroyed in Anarachnophobia anyway. And if the rocket makes any more random appearances in any of these, then that confirms that the one Wallace blew up in World of Invention was in fact a second, like a Mark II, and wasn't the original one. If any of them reference the fact that Gromit owned that hotel, then we can just assume that he's just had that running on the back burner this entire time. They probably don't, but in case they do, we're covered there, technically. And if Feathers shows up in any of these, we can just assume that he's broken out again. And considering he's definitely broken out again by the time of the next entry, it would be completely logical for him to have broken out at some point during all of this in order to be broken out ahead of time, ready for this next thing. A Grand Night Out, the kind of formerly / mostly lost media live stage show. Being a stage show in the 90s, there wasn't that much material saved from it, but we do know what happened and we do have some photos of this. There's a few videos that go more in-depth into this, which I will link in the corner or in the description if you're interested, but a general synopsis. Feathers is out of prison, like I mentioned, and once he's out, he hypnotizes Wendoline to help with his next revenge plot, with a final showdown featuring a return of the Techno Trousers, which must have just still been around after they were reused for The Last Resort. What? No. They made that other appearance, and so they must have just still had them in the loft or something since then. Sean is also here, so he must still come back and visit every now and then. Lends itself to how he's in that Red Nose Day one, while he's still primarily living with the farmer. The show seems to be quite self-aware in a way, with Wallace having built a new invention for the purposes of putting on a stage show, only for things to go wrong with the involvement of Feathers. So he must have assembled a bit of an audience in-universe to when the events of this transpire. Oh, and then by the end, Feathers is once again incarcerated. A Grand Night In, the story of Aardman. What? I know I said this before, but surely they're going to run out of plays on the name A Grand Day Out at some point soon. This sounds like it's going to be a nightmare to try and fit in, but I actually think it's quite simple. I think what we have to do is consider that the original, the new animated Wallace and Gromit segments that are purpose made for this is just footage of them watching some other documentary, although the documentary they're watching in universe is about animation because Wallace does comment on it at one point.
Ooh, animation. It looks like pure torture to me, lad.
But I think as soon as we cut away from them and see the TV screen, we're out of canon and they're actually watching like a documentary about Pixar or something. It's here specifically because Wallace is using the TV remote correctly, which, as we know, he learned how to do in the telescope, or rather, he hadn't yet learned how to do at the time of the telescope. But the teapot makes an appearance, so it also has to be post-Vengeance. And admittedly, now that I've had to move the telescope further up, this could also be further up, but it doesn't cause any other problems being here, so it's alright to just leave it. But you know what I think? I think Wallace was so inspired by watching this documentary about animation that he was inspired to try it out himself and make his own stop-motion film out of one of his previous adventures, namely A Grand Day Out, which is how it's on TV in Farmageddon, which means I've got to move Farmageddon down here. And that is also why the characters look different in A Grand Day Out, because they're not the actual people, they're little clay models made by Wallace in-universe. This also potentially explains the children's ride that looks like the rocket from A Grand Day Out that we see in Farmageddon. It could be a bit of cross-promotion that Wallace is doing. He's going a bit more mainstream with his stop-motion. Oh, and the same... That also explains how a child is playing with a little model of the rocket from A Grand Day Out in the Sean shorts, the Flight Before Christmas, which doesn't have its own card, but should be here. Beautiful. And if there's any episodes of Sean that were made after The Flight Before Christmas that in any way relate back to the events of it, that's fine, because as we established, the entire Sean show is just happening in this general area, so those episodes could easily take place down here. So I think that rocket's merchandise that Wallace had produced to tie in with his film, which was probably quite popular, just like it was in the real world, therefore warranting merchandise and children's rides. I know there's also scale models of the rocket around the house prior to this, but I reckon those could just be scale models that Wallace made on a one-off basis just to like "Ah, lad, remember when we went to the moon? I'll make this little rocket to put on the mantelpiece to remind us of the fun that we had." That kind of thing. I wish trying to do a Peter Sallis impression wasn't so incredibly difficult that even the official replacement still doesn't quite sound like him. I just want to interject for a second and clarify, I don't mean any disrespect to Ben Whitehead. His late-stage impersonation is very good, but it is still just not quite 100% there in a few minor places. Like here, Gromit! Where he pitches down, I feel like Peter Sallis would have pitched up with the kind of elongated it. It's just a few little things like that throw it off every now and then.
He did, Gromit!
That's all. I've found that the longer it's been since you heard Peter Sallis, the better Ben Whitehead sounds. But yeah, I don't know why I'm saying this as if he's going to watch this entire video and get personally offended, but, you know, he's doing great. After the film was popular, he probably built a machine in the basement to produce them at a much bigger scale to sell. Now, after I managed to work in A Grand Night In, because it had those original bits of animation purposely made for it, when I then heard about another behind-the-scenes documentary, I thought there's a chance that might have a bit of original animation in it as well, even if it's only, like, one shot, like the charity thing, but I couldn't find it anywhere online. IMDb said that it was featured on the DVD The Incredible Adventures of Wallace and Gromit, which I nearly did end up buying before I realised it actually was online after all. I just had to look a bit harder. Although there was a review on the DVD listing saying that the behind-the-scenes film was 30 minutes instead of 15, so I did actually end up buying it. Only to discover that not only is the film only 15 minutes long after all, but it was also already included on the Three Cracking Adventures DVD, which I've had since Christmas 2009.
Wallace and Gromit. Gromit doesn't care. Gromit's fine.
And in fact, not only that, this DVD is a US release that was imported at some point. So this is NTSC. This one's PAL. So this one's better.
PAL, best.
But I can now confirm, after all that, without a shadow of a doubt, that there is no additional original animation made for that behind-the-scenes film that we now need to try and fit in. It's okay. We're safe. Interruption from me in the future. Am I going insane? Or is the text just not quite right? I can't tell. Like, I think Aardman Presents is in the middle and centred. Is it just because Wallace is a longer word than Gromit? But they've got the ampersand in the centre? That it just looks a little bit wrong? I don't know. It just feels off slightly. I think it might be because they're slightly canted on the actual image. So that if you get them straight, the title is completely off, and that just makes it look even worse. But I don't know, I think this might just be me. In fact, actually, while we're on the topic, the copy of the documentary that I found online eventually was quite low quality. So what I've done is I've ripped the PAL copy of it from this, along with some other stuff from here, some really old Nick Park work that I can't find any centralised copy of online anywhere. Well, I will have done by the time this video goes out, put them on the Internet Archive, and I will attempt to upload them to the second channel for simplicity's sake. If YouTube will let me, they will be there. If not, they will be just on archive.org. That was a horribly clunky way of saying that, but you get the point. The National Trust Jubilee Buntathon advert. Wallace and Gromit are hired to decorate Tottington Hall with bunting. It's not said explicitly to be Tottington Hall, but it's the same set, so for all intents and purposes, it's Tottington Hall. It's just missing the rooftop garden. Remodeled at some point, I assume. You can see the van is in its loaf and death colour scheme, although it's branded as Odd Jobs, which I reckon lines up pretty well with how they'd probably brand themselves after the events of Vengeance, dialing back a bit from being explicitly Wallace and Norbots. You could argue, why are they doing this? Why have they not sent a Norbot to do it? I reckon the Norbots are all busy in other people's gardens.
They were looking after fireworks in other people's houses.
And they are also having a picnic, so I guess they were going anyway, and they thought, we might as well do this. And by we, I mean you, lad. So I don't think that's an issue. I think that's a fairly reasonable explanation. It's also quite clear at the start from what Wallace says that they've not been to Tottington Hall for ages, possibly since Where Rabbit.
Things have certainly changed around here.
So they probably got hired for a job there and thought, oh, lad, remember that? We'll do that job ourselves. Be interesting to see the place, see if it's changed. That kind of thing. You get the idea. Although you may also initially be led to believe that this is before Where Rabbit, because Wallace is initially surprised at the size of Tottington Hall.
Oh, crumbs. Look at the size of it.
But then he immediately says the thing implying it's been ages since he's been there, so that directly contradicts itself a bit.
Oh, crumbs. Look at the size of it. Things have certainly changed around here.
But, I mean, you know, if it has been as long as it's been since Where Rabbit, which is at least several years, there's been at least 2 Christmases in this entire period, he probably just forgot just quite how big it is. Also, looking back at Were-Rabbit again, it's pretty concrete that at the start of that he's never met Lady Tossington before.
Andy Pesto, you're here.
Oh, your ladyship.
Mr.
Wallace.
Mr. Wallace.
So I'm very confident that this is set after Were-Rabbit. Yeah, I suppose she could have never actually met them here, but it still could be before. But look, just, it's okay. It works here. It's alright. The odd jobbing thing fits well. It's okay. Also, it's now explicitly owned by the National Trust, so that happened at some point through all of this. A Renault advert. In this advert, the pair are testing this Renault van. Initially, I thought that maybe this could be a replacement van after the damage to the other one at the end of Vengeance, but the way everything else worked out, I couldn't make that work. So instead, we can chalk this up to being another odd job type thing. Not even just testing cars generally, but specifically testing Renault Kangoos, since this is specifically the Kangoo-matic. Although, you know, maybe this was the first job they got offered in their vehicle testing job, and they named the machine after it, and they actually are just testing other things as well. I suppose they could still be, like, I mean, their van is very old. I suppose they could be testing potential new vans, but none of them are up to their standard of rugged dependability as they're all reliable. But given that this one explicitly passes every test category with flying colours, and they then still aren't in it when we next see them, I think it's probably safer to say that they're just being contracted to test vehicles. This intellectual property office thing, what I'm going to assume is another odd job, is making this video for the intellectual property office where Wallace talks about inventing and such with a voice that makes early stage Ben Whitehead sound like, well, Peter Sallis.
So, they've asked us to help inspire you. Oh, heck, that's top secret. Patent pending. Oh, lend a paw, lad.
It makes sense for Wallace to be doing this by this point, considering by now he's hosted his own invention science show. So in the public eye within the universe, he's probably most known as a scientist. And also he was on the news with Norbot and such. So I think the general public are fairly aware of him and his inventing prowess by now. So it's logical for the intellectual property office to see him as a solid candidate to host their promotional video. Sprocket Rocket. Following on from that last one, this is another Flash game, which really doesn't actually have that much to do with Wallace and Gromit, to be honest, but it's a part of that same IPO collaboration, so I think we can just assume that it's an in-universe game that they made to tie into the in-universe advert. Inventing for Britain. First of all, I'm not 100% sure this picture that I've used is actually related to this, and it's not just some other piece of Wallace and Gromit promotional media with the phrase inventing for Britain on it, just more generally. But either way, I don't even really know if this one really exists. It's weird. The only place I can find that talks about this is Wikipedia, and it's completely, there's no reference, and I can't find any footage anywhere. But if it does in fact exist, it sounds like it's in a similar vein to the last one, and it's just kind of an in-universe collaboration to promote invention in some form, which we can assume at this point that they've just been contracted to do these things among their various odd jobs. A world of cracking ideas. This was a what was this? This was something to do with a London Science Museum, and there were some tie-in videos, which I don't think are actually online, but once again, I'm going to assume that it's a similar situation to the last few. This just among their odd jobs after the TV appearance and subsequent promotional appearances over here, they were contracted by the London Science Museum to do some promotional videos to show there, due to their relative notoriety in the public eye. Makes sense. The music video for Limo Land by Barry White. What? I unironically listen to Barry White sometimes. How did I not know about this? But they sure are here, with Wallace working as a bartender on a limo and trying to serve people cheese. Does this mean that Barry White and Tina Turner are plasticine in this universe? Or does that mean that some biological people have plasticine counterparts? Does every biological person have a plasticine counterpart? Could go either way, honestly. According to the YouTube upload of this video, which was posted by someone who worked on it, apparently Barry White hates this music video and he banned it in some way. So that's sure some amazing trivia. Oh, this is where that Gromit soap is, by the way, that I mentioned. And with that, we move on to the final-ish arc, kind of. We've kind of had I don't even know. I feel like it's mostly just sheep. I feel like the sheep arc starts, like, here, and just consumes everything up to, like... Okay, maybe it's not that long. Maybe cut this out. I don't know where I'm going with this. Chicken Run. What? This isn't my only evidence, but First of all, in an episode of Rex the Runt, Edwina, the only chicken who's actually seen to be killed in the original Chicken Run, makes a physical appearance auditioning for the role of a monster in a in-universe play. There's even a kind of indirect reference to Chicken Run being released around this time.
Look, sorry, I know chickens are fashionable at the moment, but it's a beast we're looking for, you see.
But since it's not an explicit reference, we're safe assuming that she was, at this point, out in the world on her own as a real chicken within the universe before ending up in the farm by this point in the timeline, where she eventually meets her end at the hands of Mrs. Tweedy. Is this the one canonical death we've had so far in all of this? Am I missing something really obvious? Preston wasn't alive in the first place, so that doesn't really count. Someone probably dies in Early Man. I've not actually seen Early Man, I'm sorry. Initially, I only had this in here because there's a concrete connection in Chicken Run 2 which drags this in with it regardless. But then, as well as that Rex thing, I heard that some people theorise that the delivery of the pie-making machine to the farm is Wallace, and that is a driver. If only we had some kind of concrete connection to Wallace making pies that could have eventually led him to sell a pie-making machine.
Need a hand, Gromit? These pies are going to fly off the shelf, lad.
Two times in one video. The N-Power backing the bid advert in which Wallace and Gromit set up a pie business. I did consider putting Chicken Run after this, thinking maybe after he'd moved on from the pie sales business, he sold his pie machine off to Mrs. Tweedy, but I reckon he'd probably still be making pies in the Loaf and Death era, considering he's not exclusively making bread, because he's at least making tea cakes.
Tea cakes, lad! The wholemeal fruit on me knees!
So I think it's reasonably likely that he has a bit of a Greggs setup and he's selling all manner of baked goods. Maybe he built a newer, smaller, more efficient pie machine, at which point he sold off his original one to Mrs. Tweedy. I reckon after he got fired from trying to serve people cheese in Barry White's limo, he built the first pie machine, then went back to the drawing board a bit and managed to scale it down a bit to make it smaller and more efficient, at which point he sold off his original one to the Tweedies, and then continued using his smaller, more refined version to make pies for football fans, and then subsequently the bakery. Ultimately, I like that transition, so I'm gonna leave him this way around. Oh yeah, also this advert ends with Gromit running onto the football pitch to try and stop a stray pie, and he accidentally wins the match. Now, you'll recall that we've already covered all of the cracking contraption shorts, but the keen-eyed among you may have noticed that we actually haven't, and there's one more. The Soccer-matic, in which Wallace builds a football machine.
How do you like my Preston North End Soccer-matic, Gromit?
To fully explain why I've put this here, I will have to explain the next one first. Jacob's Crackers advert. I originally had this advert back up in the pre-Vengeance quickfire round of other cracking contraption shorts, because it follows a similar kind of format to one of those, with Wallace making a very low-resolution machine to use up a surplus of crackers in various ways, all named with film puns of varying quality.
The Great Escape! Whippy! Play it again, Salmon! The Handbusters! Delicious! Oh no! It's Apocalypse Chow! No, just need a bit of fine-tuning, eh, lad?
But then I noticed it has the teapot in it, so it can't go there. This kept happening when I was planning this. I kept putting things in places with relative confidence, but then the series is just so darn British that the teapot just kept cropping up and I wasn't expecting it, and I had to reshuffle things again. Anyway, now that it's down here, we can just assume that that's the next appearance of the replacement teapot. And in the newspaper that we can see Gromit reading at the start, he's in it. For some reason, in the sports section. Clearly, the only reasonable explanation for this is that everyone was so impressed by the stray pie incident that Gromit was hired by a football team. That's why I put the Soccer-matic down here. I think this is Wallace trying to help Gromit train for his job as a footballer. This has been the incredibly brief football sub-arc. Thank you for listening. Having now left the football team, because he just wasn't that into it, the pair get into baking after the success of their footballer pies, only to run into serial killer Paella Bakewell. Now, I was completely done with this script. I was totally happy with it. I've been working on it on and off for a few weeks, and I was basically ready to start recording. And then SomeBoiOnline accidentally brought himself back into this again, by posting a video of an in-depth analysis of every Easter egg he could find in Vengeance Most Foul, referencing other projects. Now, most of these are either inconsequential to our overall conversation, or don't cause any issues with the order we've got things in, or are things that I'd already noticed or seen mentioned elsewhere and had factored in. So it was mostly okay. But there was just this one thing that really threw a spanner in the works. What is, as he says, basically the only piece of evidence we have for Vengeance Most Foul taking place after Loaf and Death, potentially, is that in Vengeance, Wallace's system for getting out of bed is the Get You Up Deluxe, but in Loaf, it's just the Get You Up. However, I think this is okay. I think we can work around this. Wallace has had some form of wake-up tech, basically, this entire time, since at the absolute least Curse of the Wereabit, and we don't actually see him get up in the morning in A Grand Day Out, so it's possible he was already at it even then. Granted, at the start of The Wrong Trousers, it does sound like it's a fairly new invention.
Well, that went as well as could be expected, didn't it?
But he could just be talking about this particular iteration where it does sometimes like switch to the other side of the room and things like that. And as we all know, he's remodeling the house a lot. So I think it's fair to assume that it was called the Get You Up in at least some of these previous forms. What's it? Does it have a name in Wereabit? Hold on. No, it's not. It's not labelled at all. Sorry, I noticed this when I was planning this. Are the names on those bottles composited on after the fact? It looks clearer than the bottle. I feel like when the shot panned away, the keyframing of the text was slightly off, and you could tell it moved differently to the bottle. I'm not sure. All right, just had to fact check there. Yeah, it's not labelled as anything in Wereabit, but it could have internally been called the Get You Up at any point in which he has that kind of technology. By the time of Vengeance, we know he's gone off the deep end and is relying on his inventions for everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if he started labelling things as Deluxe and Pro. He's pulling a bit of an Apple and he's just kind of slapping extra branding names on things just for the fun of it. Especially considering that in this case, the system is even more advanced than any that we've seen before. So it's those things combined, it's logical for him to have decided to slap a Deluxe on it. But then obviously at the end of Vengeance, he's dialed everything back a bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if he went back to a more kind of a simpler wake-up system. And in doing so, I wouldn't be surprised if he reverted back to just calling it the Get You Up, which is a name that he then maintained until its implementation in Loaf and Death, and when it's tightly integrated with the bakery setup. That's my explanation. I explained it in a slightly clunky way and had to stop in the middle for a fact check, but I think I'm happy with that. Oh, and by the way, Feathers is out again. At some point after his arrest at the end of the stage show, he's broken back out of the zoo using a ladder and bed sheets method. So Wallace and Paella begin their whirlwind romance, and that's where the entry stops. Hear me out. Now, when I said this entry was Loaf and Death, what I actually meant was the first, 7-ish minutes of Loaf and Death. Now, what I'm about to say is a bit of a stretch, I'm not going to lie, but I refuse to fall at this nearly last hurdle. I propose that somewhere in the middle of the montage of the start of Wallace and Paella's romance, 7-ish minutes into Loaf and Death, there's another Christmas that is entirely skipped over in the montage, but it happens, and then the rest of Loaf and Death happens after that Christmas. Why?
I'll tell you.
This Google Hangouts advert that was the bane of my existence for this entire project, because not only does it somehow feature post-meeting Wallace but pre-evil reveal Paella being friendly with Wallace and Gromit, but it also, like it's nothing, casually drops the bombshell that the pair are just friends with some of the animals from Creature Comforts, and also Ginger from Chicken Run, which just adds a whole new level of horror to the fact that he invented the pie machine. In fact, even in this advert, there's a joke about them eating a turkey, but,
Ginger, you are in fine feather.
The one where the penguin overthrows the zoo and turns it into a diamond mine and builds a giant penguin mech somehow fits in considerably simpler than this. Oh yeah, and also, I think, now that we know Wallace is friends with Ginger as just a thing that we have to accept, I think it's sometime after this, around this area, that he rediscovers the time machine in the loft or something, and only then goes back to the time of Early Man, because that also explains how on that promotional image there's cave paintings of the Chicken Run characters. I reckon when he befriended Ginger somehow, and at some point, presumably in this space, she told him about everything that happened to them. Wallace awkwardly didn't mention the fact that he potentially was the one who invented the pie machine, and then he subsequently went back to the time of Early Man and then told the cave people about his adventures and also the chickens' adventures, which is why there's cave paintings of them as well. There's also cave paintings of sheep, but that we already know there's an obvious connection between Wallace and Gromit and Sean and such, so that fits anyway. And that also fits up with Feathers stowing away on that trip, because as we saw at the start of Loaf and Death, he's out at this point. He escaped at some point a bit prior to Loaf and Death, presumably not that long before, because you'd think the zoo staff would have noticed the bed sheets and ladder and moved them. So I reckon sometime between the Cinematics Nakomatic and the start of Loaf and Death is when he broke out, and then sometime after Loaf and Death is when he went back to the time of Early Man and then had his Doc Brown moment of time travel's too dangerous. But then that breaks the cat thing, so I think alright, okay, we've established that he can be a bit of a fool. He's not taking advantage of the cheese stocks or the Roman ruins or the Beverly Hillbilly situation in his front garden. So I think it's entirely possible that after the Lost Slipper, he had a Doc Brown moment, took the cat back to Egypt, put the time machine in the loft and forgot about it, and it's been now so long and so much other wacky chicanery has happened that he completely forgot about that Doc Brown arc, got the time machine out of the loft, was like, oh lad, I forgot about this time machine, let's go for a bit of a joyride. Went back to the time of Early Man, possibly did other things as well, with Feathers stowing away as well, told them all of the stuff that he told them, came back here, then had another Doc Brown arc, or remembered his previous one and thought, oh like lad, what are we doing? Let's stop this, and then puts it back in the loft. Or destroys it, but he probably just puts it back in the loft. I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls it out again at some point. Who knows? So that's what I think happened. And then we have the rest of Loaf and Death. I'm not over the cheesy moon with this shoehorn solution. But if you've got a better answer, so with all of those mental gymnastics out of the way, Pael is defeated, they adopt Fluffles, and they live happily ever after. Except not quite, because there's still a few more things to tie up. Okay, I've had to lower the camera a little bit, because we're seriously running out of board. First of all, what else has Feathers been up to, as well as stowing away on trips back to the prehistoric era? He's been observing chickens going about their day-to-day lives to better improve his disguise as one. Yep, that's our one connection to Chicken Run 2 that I mentioned. There he is. He's there, alright. As for why I put the original Chicken Run kind of the distance back that I did, well, there's more evidence now, actually, but when I originally put it in, it was just kind of napkin maths of the lifespan of chickens and how long it takes a chick to grow up and stuff like that. But I don't even need to go into that because there's all of that other stuff. It's been 3 or so years, basically, between the two, I think. Because when we see them in Loaf and Death, they're pretty well-established bakers. Like, the entire house has been renovated into a bakery, and they've got a solid clientele that they deliver bread to every day. So they've probably been at it for quite a while, putting Chicken Run somewhere generally back here. It's alright, this isn't that important. You know what, just side note, I'm going to say something that I gather isn't a popular opinion. I think Chicken Run 2 was pretty good, alright? People talk about this like it's absolutely atrocious. I watched it for the first time for this project, and granted, I've not watched the original start to finish in about 10 years. I did watch quite a bit of it in snippets when I was working on this project, and sure, it's not got the same kind of gritty, dark vibe that the original one has, and I mean, the two are generally very tonally different, and it does suffer a bit from late-stage Aardman syndrome of the animation looking a little bit too good, where it loses a little bit of the charm. I really feel like Were Rabbit is the perfect middle ground in terms of this, where it looks incredible, but it's still very clearly very handmade. Like, it's weird to say, but look at the inside of Wallace's mouth in this shot. So you can see where kind of the colour slightly pushes over into the other bit. It's very handmade and very charming. Whereas late stage Aardman is so incredible that it's almost too good, it's almost too clean. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not knocking it, it's still incredible. I suppose objectively it's more incredible that it can be this flawless, but you know what I'm saying? And they shouldn't have recast Julius Wahala, and the Paloma Faith song was a bit jarring, but other than that, it was pretty decent. Okay, anyway, Wallace and Gromit at the proms. Yeah, in spite of their aforementioned solid, frequent bread clientele, they then completely ditch baking entirely and go back to odd jobbing. I know that seems not that it doesn't really make sense, but I think I will have convinced you by the end of this. So anyway, in this, Wallace and Gromit are invited to appear and work on the BBC proms, and even directly interact with the musicians on stage, implying stronger than ever that the plasticine and biological people just kind of coexist in this universe. Gromit plays a priceless violin, which Wallace promptly sits on and destroys by mistake. Classic hijinks, you know. The only issue with this is that it directly features clips from the original 3 films. In fact, no, actually, all of them. I'm used to Were-Rabbit not appearing in things because of the weird DreamWorks licensing, but no, it does include clips from Were-Rabbit and also Loaf and Death. So that's a bit of an issue, and we can't just pull a Grand Night In thing here and say that only the animated parts are canon, because like I said, he directly interacts with the live action people. So I think what we're going to have to say this is that Wallace just ended up subsequently also making films of the other adventures in the same ways he did with A Grand Day Out. I'm not saying that what we're seeing is those films, because that feels like a bit of a cop-out to say that we're half of the time we're just watching the story within the story. I think we are with the first one, because it also explains why the models look different. In fact, that original Wallace test animation could be a test animation done in universe by Wallace. Still think the Gromit one's an actual dog though, because he shows up again in Vengeance on that pinboard. But yeah, I think films of some of the adventures that are made in universe are things that exist and are shown in this. I think that's what this is. I think that's what this is about. It's not perfect, but neither is any of the mental gymnastics I've had to do to get this far, and I'm not giving up now. I've put this down here specifically because there is almost definitely some minor reference, even if it's just like the Roman numerals in the credits at the end, to the fact that it is 2012 when this is taking place. So it's 2012, so I thought it was safe to just put it near the end. And also it has to be after Loaf and Death because it has clips of Loaf and Death in it, so Wallace has to have had time to make a film out of that. Fluffles must have just wanted to stay at home, or she's in the audience maybe, watching the musical performances. You can't prove she isn't. We are most amused and amazed. Seriously, I kept thinking that this script was ready, and then I just kept finding more and more increasingly obscure,
bad to worse, I'm speaking in verse,
bits of Wallace and Gromit adjacent media. This particular one is an ITV comedy show thing from 2018 to celebrate then Prince, now King, you know what I'm trying to say, Charles's 70th birthday, in which the duo video call in, and there's also a separate promotional clip that was shared online, which is set just before that, but we can consider them one entity, it's fine. I was considering putting this way back up in the kind of BBC arc, where arguably the proms thing should also have gone if it wasn't for the Loaf and Death connection, thinking maybe they just branched out into ITV as well, but since this is definitively set in like 2018 and there are established Christmases and things throughout this, I didn't want to put it back up there and end up like pushing the wrong trousers into 2026 or something. Although based on what comes after this, I think it's fair to assume that this is just another odd jobbing situation, and they've completely abandoned the baking and are now concretely back to odd jobbing. But I think it does make sense, we'll get to it. So I think this is just an odd job. They were hired to appear on this TV show based on notoriety from World of Invention, being on the news with Norbot, subsequently promoting all those science-related things, and then being a filmmaker. They're just very much in the public eye, and they were called in to appear on this special. This is going to become a slightly running theme. Fluffles, she's ill, she's bedridden, or she's out getting more cheese or something. It's okay, don't worry about it. She'll be all right. She's just got a cold. Also, after the call's over, this exchange happens.
I propose a toast. Happy birthday, Chuck.
Chuck? Bit over familiar? I know. I think it's different rules for plasticine.
Which I know is a joke, but in the context of this is actually absurdly good evidence that the biological and plasticine bits of society coexist but are kind of separate. I can't believe the PG Tips Monkey and the host of Pointless are the ones helping me make the case for human-clay relations, but here we are, I suppose. This TV special is also where we finally get the prophesized Morph connection. Yeah, Wallace name drops Morph.
A dog morphs there. He gets everywhere.
So now we have to deal with the implications of that. I did read online that there's a Wallace and Gromit pencil in a Morph episode, so I was considering trying to work that in some way, but actually it fits quite well if we assume that this pencil was also merchandise that Wallace made when he was making his films of the adventures. And I reckon Morph is like an in-universe TV star who does a live action show, like he's live action in his show, whereas Wallace does animations of himself. It's a bit inconsistent, but don't worry about it. Based on the way Wallace talks about him in this, it does kind of sound like that's the situation. Oh, and also the Morph theme song makes an appearance in the first Shaun the Sheep movie, so that also lends credence to this theory. You can still go on the board though, he's still part of this. In fact, I reckon in universe he's into animation as well, and I reckon he teamed up with Wallace after the popularity of A Grand Day Out to help him make all of those subsequent films, and found an in-universe studio also called Aardman. I know that feels like mental gymnastics and a half, just to no real end, and just seems completely pointless. But I still hadn't explained how there was that Aardman book with them on in that episode of Rex the Runt, and I can't just leave that and hope that everyone forgets about it. Although you hadn't you? I could have gotten away with that. Oh yeah, also the marrow is on the wall again, contrary to all prior arrangements, so I think that definitely solidifies in my mind that it was just repaired after the arachnophobia incident. And arachnophobia. And also, in terms of release date, the marrow hadn't been in anything for like 15 years at this point, so I don't know what it's doing there, but whatever, it's fine. It's just been out of shot for a while, or they took it off the wall and found it again recently and put it back up for old time's sake. P&O Cruises all hands on deck show, because at this point, why not? A pair of odd jobbed their way into the P&O Cruises team, where they're trying to gather great ideas for cruise-related inventions. Now, I do realise that throughout this entire ordeal, I've been promoting this theory about biological and plasticine people kind of living separately but also peacefully, but I'm now proposing that we're seeing them together and they look like this. But I counted the events of the stage show as canon, so I feel like it's not that much of a stretch to consider these events canon. We just might be seeing it wrong, like in reality, like they are actually there, made of plasticine. You're just not seeing it, right? You're just losing your mind. You've been watching a video about the Wallace and Gromit cinematic universe for the last hour and a half. You're slowly going insane. You don't know what you're seeing anymore. And honestly, at this point, I suppose we've got to count it in its entirety. Walkabout costume Wallace carrying lifeless Gromit and all. Just don't think about it too much. It's fine. It's like how I counted those photos from the end of that Grand Adventures advert, even though they're in a different art style. It's just a different art style. It counts. It's fine. Don't worry about it. This show also involves clips from the films being shown, further lending credence to the slightly boring theory that Wallace and Morph made film versions of their adventures in universe. Like I say, I do like to try and consider that after A Grand Day Out, we've been seeing actual reality and not just the films within the films. But if that's the case, it does have to be said that Wallace has managed to just perfectly one-to-one recreate them. So we might have to assume that we've been watching the films within the films, which I know is disappointing. But I mean, it does work. Like we can choose to assume. I mean, this entire thing is just insanity anyway. I don't think it's out of the question to assume he managed to perfectly one-to-one recreate what happened just out of plasticine, considering he's made of plasticine. Does that mean some plasticine isn't sentient? I suppose so, because I suppose some of the props are probably made. Yeah, like the cheese that he eats in The Grand Day Out is made out of plasticine. So plasticine doesn't inherently mean sentience. But does that mean you could like cut off the limb of a plasticine person and mold it into something else? There's many implications of this that I'm not going to delve into. I'll leave them up to you. I suppose in some of the films, Gromit does kind of break the fourth wall a little bit. Like when he winks at the camera in a close shave or turns to the audience when Wallace tells him Norbot's voice activated. I mean, if you still want to cling on to those not being films within the films and us actually seeing the real events, we could just assume that he's winking at Wallace when he winks in a close shave, and when he looks at the camera in Vengeance Most Foul, he's just kind of, like, if you imagine you're Wallace in this situation, he's just kind of going... just like looking away in disbelief, just like, what, really? Kind of thing. I mean, that works. I'll leave that up to you. They must have also made films of some of Sean's solo adventures, because they're also involved in this a bit, as is Sean himself. You could argue, considering Wallace and Morph are the filmmakers here, how did Sean tell them what he'd been up to in order for them to make films or TV shows out of it? Considering he can only bleat. Well, way back once again in the National Accident Helpline Dog Show, in the episode with the chicken, what's her name? Edwina from Chicken Run. She doesn't speak English, she only makes chicken noises, but one of the characters can understand what she's saying, and one of the other characters even says, "I didn't know you could speak chicken."
Yes, I realise that. It's just that we can't afford the prosthetics.
I didn't know you spoke chicken.
Which again is a joke, but it also, again, I'm going to take entirely seriously for the purposes of this. So what if the chickens from Chicken Run are actually bilingual, and chicken noises are actually a legitimate language in this universe, but they just also learned English at some point? And equally, people of other species can also learn the languages of others, such as the National Accident Helpline dog who could speak chicken. Or not even speak it, but understand it at least. So what if Edwina can only speak chicken? She isn't bilingual, because she doesn't actually say anything in the film before she meets her end, so it's entirely possible that she only speaks chicken, which is why she speaks chicken in the Rex the Runt episode, despite the fact everyone else in that show speaks English. The point is, what if the sheep are a similar situation? It's possible for, the bleating is a language, and it's possible for other species to learn sheep language. They could have got in touch with someone who can translate from sheep to English in order for them to, you know what I'm trying to say. You could make the same argument about Morph and the kind of language he has, but as we've established, his show is a show in universe. He's a TV star, so it's entirely possible he can actually speak English outside of that show, and that's just part of the character or something. Or he could be bilingual again, and whatever his species of, like, subspecies of the plasticine human type thing. That's their language, but he's bilingual and can speak English as well. All of these are possible options. All of them work equally as well. None of them are that important. It could just be a Who Framed Roger Rabbit baby situation, and as soon as the cameras are rolling, he's just completely different and just shouting expletives everywhere. Although, if we're establishing that plasticine animals in this universe have their own languages, which at this point I don't think is disputable after the chicken thing, does that mean that Gromit could communicate verbally? Because bear in mind, he's not technically a completely mute character, because there are a few very rare occasions where he does make very slight dog noises.
Have enough.
So maybe Gromit can only speak dog language but can understand English and could theoretically communicate with a translator. I don't think he is bilingual, but is just not talking English though, because otherwise he would have probably broken his silence. And they've never coordinated a translator, or at least not that we've seen, but it's possible. Alright, sorry about the change of set. I had to put my Feathers McGraw slippers back on because I'm standing on the hardest floor known to man, and I've been shooting today for 2 hours and 15 minutes so far, and my feet are killing me. This hadn't been found and uploaded when I recorded the original main beef of this video, but hilariously, there is a Wallace and Gromit advert for the TV license.
Oh, yes. I'd like to get a new TV license, please. Oh, that sounds easy.
Which, you can't make this stuff up. And in terms of its contents, it reuses footage from a close shave, but is dubbed over to be about the TV license. So I think it's safest to assume this is an in-universe advert, reusing footage from the in-universe close shave. I think it's probably safest. A little bit disappointing. In fact, actually, no, it's not disappointing, because it means that there's a solid chance he's still not paying the TV license, but he's doing an advert for it. If this was just canon in and of itself, all this would mean is he's finally paid for it. Now, this is funnier being an in-universe advert.
Ooh, cracking breakfast, Gromit. Woo, woo.
Only inside special packs of...
The Wallace and Gromit Walkabout Mini-Golf DLC level. Wallace, celebrating the success of his various films, has set up a golf event in his house for people to come and play. There's references to basically everything in this, so it has to be this late. The rocket's even here, so that was definitely a Mark II in World of Invention, just in case we were in any doubt. They've even still got the trousers. They must have just shoved them back in the loft again since we last saw them. And they've also dug out a bunch of equally ancient stuff, like the Auto Chef and Lad. Lad's still here. The flock have even stopped by to muck around a bit. And Feathers is here, just kind of chilling in the train, going round. Although, to be fair, Wallace is continually fooled by the chicken disguise, even after seeing him remove it right in front of him.
Good grief, it's you. A chicken? Behind all this?
So I think Feathers is taking advantage of this and the fact that they've opened their house to the public to sneak in and kind of assess the place, see if anything's changed, to try and plot whatever his next form of revenge may be. Gromit isn't fooled by the disguise as easily, obviously, but I think he's preoccupied outside, or possibly also reading in bed throughout this entire thing, so it's possible, I suppose, that he's just not noticed either. He's just not seen that, like, Wallace has seen him, but assumes there's just a chicken that's come to play. Gromit's not seen him at all. Side note, when I was looking online for information about this, instead of searching Wallace and Gromit Golf, I accidentally searched gold, and if you're willing to drop just over a cool grand, a Wallace and Gromit commemorative coin sure can be yours. But you know who isn't involved in this? All together now. It's Fluffles. It's always Fluffles. I reckon she's out putting up promotional posters advertising the golf event. That's my personal theory about where she is during this. I didn't mention where she was in the last one. Maybe she suffers from seasickness. Good enough for me. Next, the Wallace and Gromit Power Wash Simulator DLC. Literally, as I was finishing up this script, they just kept releasing new content. This happened multiple times, but to be fair, I think this is a reasonable fit. Following on from letting the entire public through the house is now filthy, and it needs a thorough clean, and that's what is happening in this. You're playing as probably Gromit, or maybe an outside contractor they've hired in. They're sick of being hired by other people. They're going to get someone else in for once to clean up the mess. I'm not sure this wasn't out yet when I wrote the script. I'm not sure if it's out now. It's probably out when this video is finished, because this is going to take me 100 years to edit. Hopefully that works fine. We can hope. Probably. Okay, it's later on, and a longer preview of for the Power Wash game DLC has been released. and it has the cooker in it, interestingly. So I suppose that means Star Wars either hasn't happened yet, or it happened before A Grand Day Out. But also, as if the people who wrote the dialogue for this were aware of the potential continuity errors with the door on the rocket and the rocket being sent off in World of Invention, Wallace specifically refers to the rocket here as...
the old moon rocket, Mark 1.
So, concretely, absolutely, if we were in any doubt at all somehow, even at this point, we know for certain that other one was a Mark 2. Okay, it's now even later. The DLC's come out. I've just been watching some gameplay of it, and it's got the bakery van in it, so we need to do a slight bit of reshuffling. I'm just going to take these two and move them to just after Chicken Run 2, and then it's fine. Everything still works. Because at that point, they haven't repainted the van yet to be odd-jobbing related. It's fine. The Thrill-O-Matic, the Blackpool Pleasure Beach ride, because of course, why would that not be in here? Counting that cruise ship show, we're counting this. From what I've seen, this is basically just a recap of the main films that you go through, and there's like animatronics and things, special effects and whatnot. So I think it's reasonable, to be fair, to say that this is in-universe just exactly the same. Just, again, promotion for the films that Wallace and Morph made in-universe. So honestly, I think that's all there's really to that. The trousers are back in the bin at the end. They could be the actual trousers. We know they've still had them until recently. And we're also back at costumed walkabout characters. So, you know what? Sure. Let's say it's another all-hands-on-deck situation, and just the pair sometimes drop by for a visit and just walk around a bit and meet people. Let's just say that that's canon. On a similar note, I know this is a bit of a cop-out, but there's a few other more obscure Wallace and Gromit games, and Shaun the Sheep games as well, that are just too gamey to fit in, which is a weird thing to say, but let me explain. Like the Were-Rabbit DVD game, where Wallace talks to the audience about playing the game itself, and the town square is some kind of game board. The cracking contraptions are shown a bit, and Hutch is helping them find clients that they've already got at the start of the movie, even though Hutch isn't created until the middle of the movie. So it doesn't work, no matter how you slice it. There's a few things that just by their very format don't fit in. There's also like the old PC games from the 90s, where like Wendeline asks you quiz questions about the events of the short films. I can't even remember where I heard about this, but there is also an unfinished, unreleased kart racer game, which has a few bits of production materials online. Not much to say about this. It's just another in-universe game situation, I think. Given that it's not even like a finished product, I can't really do anything else with it other than say it was an unfinished product in universe. But hey, you know, it's something. It's in there at least. So I think the only way we can fit these things in is to say that they're also like in-universe media made to go with the films that Wallace and Morph have made, which again is a bit of a cop-out, but this is really obscure, specific, absurd stuff. So we'll just have to. It's fine. It's okay. Look how much I managed to fit in. Cut me some slack, alright? Things like that, all kind of existing in the late stage as things made in universe to tie into the films that have all been made by this point. Honestly, maybe that's what's going on with that Sky Gamestar game as well. I can't decide which is more of a cop-out, it being media within the universe or it being in the most boring multiverse in history. I think they feel equally cop-outy, so I don't know if it even matters, but I'm going to say it only goes as media in media if it's a game where the fact that it's a game is explicitly referenced.
Welcome to our new interactive DVD game thingammy.
Where like a character will come on screen and explain the controls. Wallace does do that in the Sky Gamestar game, so that's going to have to go down here. I've had to zoom out a bit so we can get everything in. You can see Willem now, though, so that's good. We had him printed at our high school/college, and we had him up in the media department. And now he lives with me, so that's nice. Anyway, I mean, that might happen in the Were-Rabbit video game, in which case that's another one of these. I'm not sure. I've not actually played it. So that is a possibility. In fact, I'll put this down here just in case. And on the same basis, I was going to count the Chicken Run video game as part of the most boring multiverse in history, but I'm going to put it here just to play it safe, on the basis that maybe they made a film of the events of Chicken Run after they were told to Wallace. Could have happened, and if so, this game could have been made. So just to play it safe, I'm going to assume that it's that, but it's possible that this could also fit the most boring multiverse in history. I'm also going to say the same principle applies to things like the TechnoQuest Digest, which I didn't make a card for, but there we go, which was a like science magazine or something that Wallace and Gromit were kind of used as mascots for at one point. So I'm considering it down here, just because there's a possibility that one of them at some point makes reference to one of the films, in which case it makes sense to be media within the media all the way down here. Then we've got a couple of other things that also fit this category, which I know feels a bit disappointing, but I'm trying my best. We've got a couple of other ones that I've just made on the fly because I missed. I had it the way I'm doing this. I had a big list at the start of every main entry, and then there was a few things I mentioned on the fly that I forgot to add to the main list. It's the main list I used to gather all of the cards, so that's why there's a couple of things I missed. But point is, we've got a Shopper 13 thing, which I found out quite late on, which was a physical attraction, in which I'm considering in a similar vein to the Thrill-O-Matic. It was a physical attraction where you could control the Shopper 13. I'm considering that, again, an in-universe attraction based on the presumably made cracking contraptions also into shorts at some point, or the Shopper 13 was featured in one of them in some other way. Roblox thing, this came out, this is the other instance of them just releasing new content halfway through me planning this. This is another thing that's too gamey to really be anything other than an in-universe game. A Grand Way Out, that's the escape room, which I had heard about, I think, but then forgot about, as with quite a few of these things. And it does have a plot, but because I've not actually done it myself, I can't confirm that there isn't like some bit of dialogue where there's some reference to one of the films, or or Wallace directly says like, well done lad, you've broken out of the thing. If there's just some fourth wall break somewhere that would ruin it, as being like you're watching the events of you're playing a character in the same way as you play a character in one of the games, helping them out with whatever the predicament is that is the plot for the escape room. You could consider it that. The safest option is to just assume that at some point there's some kind of fourth wall break that would break everything, so it's safer to assume it's an in-universe thing that they set up. And then I've got an entry that just says lift dialogue, which is a reference to the voiceovers in the lifts of the Ardman headquarters, which I believe are voiced by Wallace.
Doors closing, mind them pause, Gromit.
Which I'm putting in because I've put everything else in, and this actually fits quite well, because this dialogue could just be the in-universe dialogue in whatever form the Ardman HQ takes as set up by Wallace and Morph. There's also, apparently, according to a commenter I saw on YouTube, Wallace dialogue in the lifts of the Royal Bristol Hospital, is it called? Yeah. So I think they just, as part of the pair's kind of presence in the public eye in-universe, they did that at some point as part of one of their various charity things. So that fits weirdly, surprisingly quite well. So yeah, that's a handful of things that are media within the media. Just get them out of the way. I don't know why I said get them out of the way, it's like right at the end. The Big Fix-Up. This is an augmented reality mobile game from a few years ago, which is another instance of something that I heard about at the time and then completely forgot about until now. Essentially, they're well and truly back to odd jobbing in this, and in this particular game, they're helping a new prospective mayor with his political campaign, only for him to turn out to be a villain who wants to frame the pair for the decline of the Bristol area or something. Now, you may be wondering, why have I put this down here rather than in the pre-established odd jobbing arc? Well, that's where I had it originally, but then I looked into it a bit more, and it turns out that this actually directly ties into the events of Loaf and Death. Not even in like some weird background way that I've noticed and extrapolated to make some overanalyzed point. The twist villain mayor, spoilers by the way, sorry about that, turns out to be a former partner of Paella's who's angry about Wallace because of him kind of killing her. Now, in spite of this, there's still no Fluffles, because I guess Nick Park has contracted a poodle allergy or something. You know, her absence from Vengeance Most Foul was the initial spark that led to the idea that led to this whole thing. I know Nick Park said that because there wasn't that much of a fan reaction to Fluffles in 2008, he didn't really see any kind of demand to bring her back for Vengeance Most Foul.
After making Loaf and Death, there wasn't much reaction to Fluffles, but since then, yeah, many people. Because after that, I thought, oh, she must not have meant a lot to people, or something like that.
But this is a direct sequel to Loaf and Death. Whoever made this, could you not have at least chucked her in as a cameo? I mean, technically, I've not played the entire game. She might be in there as a cameo. She probably isn't. So we're just going to have to assume that she's out again, or something. Or ill and bedridden or something. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. She's got a weak immune system. Cut her some slack. She's spent 10 years probably eating nothing but the murdered corpses of local bakers. It's not like we ever find out how Paella disposed of the bodies. Oh. So I said that as a joke. It just kind of came out. But then I've thought about it a little bit, and I don't think we do find out how Paella got rid of the bodies. So I think I've just accidentally come up with the most horrific but entirely plausible Wallace and Gromit theory. Wallace is also back to using lad in this. I don't know what's with the sudden resurgence of lad from the World of Invention era, but he's here. I mean, you could argue why is he not using a Norbot, but they're probably just out busy doing gardening jobs. I mean, they can do indoor jobs, but I mean, they are primarily garden jobs. I mean, even if they are doing indoor jobs, he could just reserve them to send out and then recommission the lad for his own personal use or something. It's fine. And also, funny story, this game also concretely confirms the existence of biological and plasticine people within the same society.
So, Mr. Wallace, I hear you've got a contraption building business for life's little odd jobs.
Oh, that's right. It's called Spick and Spanners.
And it also debunks the potential theory of them being, like, physically, geographically separate parts of society, because, I mean, the entire thing's set around Bristol. Actually, now that I think about it, the post in Trousers is addressed to Wigan, and then in Vengeance Most Foul, and Loaf and Death, and that Were Rabbit deleted scene, there's jokes about Yorkshire. So I suppose that was already debunked. Okay, now I know some of you might be thinking, why do they go from odd jobbing to food production and then back to odd jobbing again? Why are they flip-flopping around? Well, the answer to that is ultimately fluffles, basically. I'm sure you've noticed that I've not been particularly satisfied with my attempts to explain why she's not in any of the post-Loaf and Death media. But you may also be assuming, since I've managed to just about do it for those, why could I not extend the same thing to the stuff that I've put pre-Loaf and Death that's odd jobbing related? Well, first of all, even if I brought all of these down here, because I can't move them back up there because of the last one having the Loaf and Death connection, Vengeance Most Foul is still the origin of the odd jobbing, so they would still be going from odd jobbing to food back to odd jobbing again. But the truth is, I just like to imagine that she is involved in at least some of their antics. Like, for one or two things, you could explain it away with, like, she's handing out flyers, or she's ill. Then if you bring more stuff in, it starts seeming less plausible and less realistic. But also, in some cases, it just seems a shame. Like, the bunting one, it just seems a bit of a shame. Like, they've gone out to put up this bunting and have this nice picnic in the grounds of Tottington Hall. It just seems a bit sad to then end that with, oh yeah, Fluffles has got gastroenteritis today, sorry about that. I was going to say meningitis. That's a bit extreme. So yeah, I was originally just going to say that I just reckon Wallace just likes the variety that odd jobbing brings, so they end up going back to it again, getting Fluffles involved when she's not, at death's door. But then I actually had a much better idea. I realised that after the events of Loaf and Death, the whole bread thing would probably be just a constant reminder of just terrible memories. Wallace nearly getting murdered several times, and even more so for Fluffles, with a former abusive owner feeding her nothing but the corpses of plasticine bakers from the West Wallaby Street area for 10 years, and probably starving her of any other form of food until she's forced to chow down on the flesh lest she perish of a debilitating hunger. But don't you think that's just a much nicer explanation? Maybe she used the last of the body parts in that soup that she brings for Wallace as well, just to add an extra bit of horror on it for him too. And finally, after all that, Gromit gets the chair. Wait, no. I said that like Jeremy Clarkson announcing the contents of an episode of Top Gear. Tonight, Gromit gets the chair. Now, I was going to say that that's basically it. I mean, there is more. There is a few ancillary things I need to talk about, but that is I was going to say that's basically it for the main timeline. We leave the pair and Fluffles doing various odd jobbing, fully committed to it with full on uniforms and branding and everything. But there's just one little issue that we need to deal with here. As you remember, at the start of this, about 100 years ago, I set out the rules for what counts as canon to this timeline. I can't understate that any piece of Wallace and Gromit adjacent media is on here. If it's made by or endorsed by officially Aardman, and those two are in it in some capacity, it counts. I did that so I didn't have to try and fit in like every YouTube fan animation, which would just be a nightmare. I can't dial back those criteria because otherwise we'll lose all the games basically, which obviously weren't made in-house but were outsourced to a dedicated game developer, but were still officially licensed. But there's one other thing that I really think fits those parameters, and therefore I have no choice but to count it. The right trousers.
Gromit, I'd love a cheese toasty.
Yep, that's right, I have completely lost my mind because I am entirely convinced that, according to my own clearly set out definition of the concept, the horrifying sketch, The Right Trousers, from the Lenny Henry Christmas Show 1995, is, for all intents and purposes, completely valid as being canon to this timeline. I mean, think about it, this isn't just like a goofy fan parody. This was on national TV in 1995, when, as far as I can see, the bit of parody, the bit of UK fair dealing that allows parody wasn't even implemented until 2014, and it's not even like they're called, you know, Walmit and Grollis or something. This isn't a Willis and Crumble situation or Grolton and Horace. It's them. They're using their official names and the official theme song and other imagery from the official thing. I don't see any way that this wasn't officially licensed or at least approved of, which means it's canon according to my rules, and I'm not going to change my rules. You know the rules. Alright, I have 3 potential theories, and one of them is boring as heck, so we're not doing that one. Boring one is that this is a failed attempt at a live-action remake within the universe, but that's boring as heck, we're not going with that. Okay, so I propose that this is either some sort of post-apocalyptic future, it's either something unrelated or one of Wallace's inventions goes so badly wrong that it caused some kind of nuclear fallout, which only the plasticine people could survive, albeit with horrifying physical changes, and all the biological people are dead, and Fluffles has the sniffles again. Or, as we learned from the Barry White music video, it's possible that everyone in this universe has a plasticine counterpart of themselves. So what if that works the other way? What if this is the biological counterpart to plasticine Wallace and Gromit, and they're just existing out somewhere else in this world while all this is going on, minding their own business, and live-action Fluffles is bedridden, or they've just not met her. I mean, nowhere did I say that the plasticine versions of biological people have lives that follow the exact same trajectory. Arguably, if it's the counterparts theory, why is Gromit not an actual dog? Why is Gromit not an actual dog? Right, I've got it. I reckon biological Wallace used to have a real dog, also called Gromit, but he's dead. And maybe after seeing the success of his plasticine counterparts short films, he decided to create some invention which creates the horrifying Gromit beast that we see in this.
It's a beast we're looking for, you see.
And his attempt to reincarnate a second Gromit. That's horrifying, but you made it this far in, so I don't know what you're expecting. Probably not this, even then. Okay, quizzical question for you. This isn't a sponsor read. What do a plush toy, a DVD, and a pencil all have in common? They're all the evidence you need to prove that all of this exists as media within the universe. I've flushed away. I pinned that terribly. That's right, we've been watching the story within the story all along, as if we were Hugh Jackman Mouse himself. What's his name? Roddy. That's his name. There's loads of these references. I'm going to need to get a better quality copy of Flushed Away than this one I recorded off the TV when I was 10. There's also this Wallace doll / rat outfit and a Feathers McGraw cameo here, and possibly Preston as well. Although arguably this could just be another penguin. And also a momentary reference to Gromit the musical. There's a bunch of stuff, but you get the gist. And also I think Flushed Away has its own branch of the most boring multiverse in history, because there's an earlier version of Flushed Away that there's some animated scenes from, where there's the two like hamster guinea pig butlers. So I reckon that's an alternate timeline of Flushed Away, in which the alternate timeline versions of Wallace and Gromit are their versions of Wallace and Gromit. I'm not sure how to visualise that on the board, but I've said it, so you get the idea. Some people reckon that the royal chicken in Flushed Away is Bunty from Chicken Run. If it is, then the character of Bunty in Chicken Run could be a visual reference to this vaguely, possibly a bit well-known royal family chicken. There is a newspaper referring to the events of Were Rabbit in Flushed Away, but that could just be an old movie prop which got thrown out and ended up down here in the sewers. Oh yeah, remember that SomeBoiOnline, I don't know if you can link the same video twice, but whatever, Easter egg video about Vengeance Most Foul that I mentioned earlier? Well, that's relevant again, because that also brings to light something else that I hadn't noticed, hadn't seen anyone talk about, which I now have to contend with, and I've brought Flushed Away into this. On the newspaper that Peter Kay's reading, when Wallace calls him to report the post-trousers catching of feathers, is seemingly Roddy and Rita from Flushed Away, and I can't lie, that does look like them. I'll put it this way, that looks more like them than the guy driving the truck looks like Wallace in Chicken Run, and I considered that canon. But if Flushed Away is real life to this film, then how can these random rats be on this magazine? I'm sorry, I know this is a disappointing answer, but I'm just going to have to consider that they're just two people who just happen to look like these rats. I know that's a really boring answer, but we've got this far. I refuse to be derailed by some possible rats. I'm sorry. I like this stupid twist of all of this being within Flushed Away too much to just cut it out over this. Oh yeah, speaking of stupid twists, if you feel like I was going completely off the deep end with the Flushed Away connection, well, do you know what else The Wrong Trousers appears in, and is therefore arguably in the same universe as Flushed Away? No Time to Die. Yes, I propose that the entirety of the Bond franchise is in the same universe as Flushed Away, in which all of this is media. This is actually weirdly kind of indirectly backed up, almost, by the existence of a different, but clearly Bond-inspired spy franchise in the Flushed Away universe, which we see at the start of the film on this DVD, which has its front cover on the back for some reason. So, yeah, every Bond film is in the same universe as Flushed Away. I shall not be taking questions on this matter. Quick note, I wrote this Flushed Away Bond twist before I'd established the in-universe Aardman thing, and I realised that arguably, now that's the thing, this could just be considered in the main universe, and the references to the other films are just references to the in-universe films. However, that can't be what's going on here, because when we see the back of the Chicken Run DVD, we can see that it contains director's commentary with Peter Lord and Nick Park, not Wallace and Morph. Chad Kroger's just an Easter egg, he's not actually part of this. No way. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're not going to believe this. You know the whole, pins side quest I had to go on about probably an hour ago? I've got 4 more ancillary cards to fit into this, and I have exactly 4 pins left. Kind of 5 pins, because I've got this weird one that's, I think it might just be a tack that's ended up in here, or possibly one of the flat ones, but the flat bit's fallen off. So kind of 5 pins, but always good to have a spare. One of the last things I did while I was finishing up the script for this whole fiasco was to watch IsaacTings' YouTube video on the Wallace and Gromit iceberg to see if there was any deep cut stuff in there that I'd missed. And most of it was fine, most of it I'd covered, but there was something that I need to address. It did alert me to a cameo from Monty Muzzle, who is one of the new characters from the Telltale games in the game Poker Night at the Inventory.
I know nothing about video games.
I'm going to sound about 1,000 years old. I don't know what this is. We've got Sam or Max. Sam, I think? No, Max. It's ironic, it's getting Wallace and Gromit mixed up situation.
Grolton is the dog. No, Grolton is the man, Hovris is the dog, I reckon.
And we've got a Team Fortress 2 character. And I'm out.
I am so out of my depth. Who's Richard Avedon? What's a symposium? At least I know which day Friday is. That's something to cling on to.
I'm sorry, I'm so uncool. Where do I put this to visualise what I'm trying to say? I'm just going to put that there to represent that it exists as media within the Flushed/Bondverse in the same way as Wallace and Gromit exists, and it's just exactly the situation that it is in real life. These games exist in this universe, this game also exists in this universe, and they're made by the same developer, so there's an Easter egg to these games in that game. Bit of a cop-out, but I have no idea what's going on. And in fact, actually, now that we've got that in that place and we've confirmed that such a place exists, I can put that Meerkat advert on as well. That also exists in that same space. That's a cross-promotion with Farmageddon. Oh yeah, this iceberg video did also remind me about the Wallace and Gromit cameos in a few issues of the Beano. And do you know what? I don't see how that could cause any issues. The Beano's part of the universe. At a certain point, you have to ask yourself, when does it end? There's a Close Shave related mug in an episode of Angry Kid, and it's just a frame from the film. So presumably Angry Kid exists in this same kind of meta space where it also exists in, it's not really meta, but the same space where it also exists as media within the Flushed Away Bondverse. But I mean, there's probably a Gromit plush in an episode of EastEnders or something. You know what I mean? There's a Sean plush in Arthur Christmas. Is that an in-universe thing, or is that just a generic sheep and it's actually in the Wallace and Gromit universe? It'll crop up everywhere. So we're just going to accept that any other piece of media, including arguably potentially the YouTube fan animations, could all technically fit in as media within the Flushed Away Bondverse. I pointed at the wrong ones, but you know what I'm saying. So you know what? This isn't in the script, but I just realised that I could do this, and this will use up my spare pin. It's really digging into my finger. I'm bringing Gromit Gets the Chair back. This represents, fan animations, which technically, probably for the most part, you could fit into that space, but again, when does it ever end? I'm going to end that bit there. What about the Aardman episode of the South Bank show where plasticine Melvin Bragg is bonked on the head by a boom mic by Gromit? Yeah, I'm gonna consider that Flushedverse media as well. I was originally thinking that, we've already established the whole plasticine biological doppelganger situation. So I thought maybe this could be Melvin Bragg's plasticine counterpart. And when he talks about Aardman, he could be arguably talking about the pre-established in-universe Aardman created by Wallace and Morph, but he explicitly states Nick Park as the creator of Wallace and Gromit.
Hello, in tonight's Outbank show we'll be profiling the creator of Wallace and Gromit, Nick Park, and Aardman Animations.
Which would cause everything I just said to fall apart. But I think that is at least everything that they physically appear in as characters, not just the plush in EastEnders or whatever. I don't know if that's an actual thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. That's just kind of an example of the general thing I'm talking about. As of now, I think that's everything we can put in a timeline. The Melvin Bragg thing also means that the times the costume characters showed up to premieres with Nick Park can't be canon, because Nick Park can't be canon unless there are more tensions between the plasticine and biological communities than we thought. So Nick Park acts as like the biological representative for the plasticine community. What am I even saying? So Nick Park acts as the like biological human aspect of the films that Wallace and Morph make in universe, in which case this is canon just in a different way. Referring to a biological person as the creator of the plasticine person is like anti-plasticine rhetoric of putting the character's existence down to Nick Park. I don't know. I don't believe that. Now that the timeline is established and we're all in agreement, hopefully, that this makes sense. There's a few other things I want to talk about before we go. First of all, the theme song. The theme song exists in universe, which is something I've not thought about until Vengeance Most Foul, because that's when it appears the most, I think. Obviously, there's an 8-bit remix when Feathers hacks into Wallace's secret files.
Welcome to my top secret files.
There's searching looking desktop, his cheese picks, and then Wallace also plays a somber version of it on the piano when he thinks all hope's lost.
Gnomes have gone. Gadgets have gone.
Oh, also he briefly hums it at the start of the Bullyproof Fest. At first, I was confused about how this could work, how this piece of music could exist in universe and be something that Wallace associates with himself. So at first I was confused about this, but then when I ended up having to move World of Invention back up here because I had it further down and then spotted that it had the teapot in it but couldn't be after Vengeance because of the Imagine That Norbot thing, I realised, wait, that's concretely an in-universe show. And what's its theme song? I think the Wallace and Gromit theme song within this universe was created originally as the theme song for World of Invention, after which Wallace just kind of retained it as something that he associated with himself and Gromit and went on to hum it to himself and use it on his computer and play it slowly on the piano and probably other ways that we don't see. It almost definitely plays in like the Blackpool Ride and things like that. SomeBoiOnline also pointed out, he's here, I promise I'm not just like an undercover advert for him, he has a lot of Wallace and Gromit videos. He pointed out that the sheet music that Wallace has on the stand when he's playing the somber version of the theme song is called Quattro Formaggi, which is a cheese reference, but we can't technically confirm that that's the in-universe name of the theme song because he only has it closed to the cover page and he's not even actually reading from the sheet, he's just playing from memory. So Quattro Formaggi could just easily be something else that he just still has on the music stand from playing it earlier. Also, I guess it's possible for the members of the plasticine subspecies to function with just only one name, because Wallace concretely only has one name as per the letters in Vengeance and Trousers. People call it Mr. Wallace, obviously, but like I feel like your gas bill and your letter from the TV license man would almost definitely have both names on it if you had both names. Pretty sure his name's not Wallace, although, you know, who knows. I know I've mentioned the Radio Times covers a few times during all of this. I can't believe I bought this for this project, and this is the first time I'm holding it up. But even beyond those, there's a lot of kind of general photo shoots that have happened with the characters over the years for various different purposes, and for the most part, they're kind of inconsequential. They could kind of just fit in anywhere, just kind of a glimpse into the kind of daily life. There's a few, like Feathers might be in there, so that presumably has to be in one of the periods of time, one of the many periods of time where he's out of prison. I'm really holding this up for as long as possible to get my money's worth out of it. Some might be specifically related to specific films, so they could either be glimpses into that period of time, or if they don't work in that way. Like if it's this promotional photo of Wallace and Wendelin, which doesn't really make any sense. Like, why are they taking a picture together? When would that have happened? Are they who's he waving to? That could just be an in-universe photo shoot to promote the animated version of A Close Shave that Wallace and Morph made. I'm saying this mostly because if I try and track down every single one of them and fit them in, I may actually go insane, and this video might be literally 10 hours long. Generally, rule of thumb, if there's a sheep in it, it's probably in the sheep arc. The feathers thing I already mentioned, and yeah, that's basically that. By the way, if you weren't entirely sold yet on this films within the films theory, then I would like to present you with this t-shirt. I mean, granted, this does strongly imply that they're live action films, but I mean, I suppose it's possible that the wrong trousers at least could be. I mean, the trousers are there, that's definitely what this one is centered around. Or this could have just been a promotional photo that they set up for the film in universe. Then there's this one, which I reckon fits in kind of around here, around the time that Feathers was like the Traitors advert, when he's kind of looming around the house, and around Christmas, which is also presumably when... The other thing I wanted to try and figure out was, when exactly is all of this? We do get a handful of bits of information, but you'll see. Years are rarely mentioned, but there are a few things that we know for certain. Okay, strap in. We're post-1919 because Wallace name drops Tesco like a minute into A Grand Day Out. Tesco? Definitely post-1923 due to the existence of the TV licence, and definitely post-1932 because of Mr. Grobag talking about the slugs incident.
Great slug blight of 32. Not even the Great Duck Plague of 53 stopped it.
More seriously, in the Soccer-matic, Wallace name drops
Nobby Styles, Tom Finney, Get Hurst, Shankly, Pongo Waring, Stanley Matthews.
The youngest of whom only started their football career in 1957. Of course I had to look that up. I've spent the last 4 hours talking about the Wallace and Gromit cinematic universe. I don't know anything about football.
Don't really know what's happening, Jeff.
In Anarachnophobia, Wallace mentions a Radio Rentals, and they went out of business in 2000. And someone else mentions 1950s plumbing in that. But then N-Power was only founded in 2000, and we know it definitely exists in universe because they're very clear, they're very prominently using N-Power powered stuff in the adverts. Wallace makes a Doctor Who reference in Crackers in Space, so we're post-1963. In Curse of the Were-Rabbit, the pre-decimalization symbol for pence is still being used, meaning we're potentially pre-1971. But then in some places, the modern P is used. But then in The Lost Slipper, Wallace says we're all in the EEC now, so it's at least 1973. In fact, it must be quite close to 1973 if he's wording it like that, like it's a recent thing.
All in the market together. Old differences forgotten, and no need at all to mention the war.
Although he also says in that 1066 is 900 years ago, which would make it 1966, and that 2098 is 100 years in the future, making it 1998. Although both of these do have a lot of leeway, given that they're probably just rounded guesstimates, and things are always longer ago than you think they were. In Vengeance Most Foul, we know some form of internet exists because of Feathers remote accessing Norbot, and the computer in the zoo has a GUI rather than just being a command line, so it's at least post-1981 at the absolute earliest. But then World of Invention, and in a different way, The Big Fix-Up and We Are Most Amused and Amazed, and the Proms thing are so firmly rooted in reality that I don't know if we can say they're any time other than when they were released. And then, of course, Google Hangouts infamously exists somehow by the end. So I think the answer is, it is 2010 in World of Invention, and it is 2021 in The Big Fix-Up, and it is 2012 in The Proms, and it is 2018 in We Are Most Amused and Amazed. But the development and direction of technology in the Plasticine bit of society is just rapidly, broadly different to how it is in the biological part of society, somehow. And Wallace and Gromit are just ageless beings who remain perpetually the same despite other Plasticine people like Peter Kay visibly aging. Now, to be clear, this isn't an issue with my timeline. This is an issue no matter what order you put these in. Look, Gromit is a beagle, apparently, alright? And beagle life expectancy is 12 to 15 years at the absolute best of times. So even if you were to just look at Trousers, Rabbit, and Vengeance in a vacuum in that order, it already doesn't work. The amount of time that it must have been for Peter Kay to go from this to this to this, well, Gromit was one long enough ago for Wallace to have had hair like this at the time. There is no way that beagle is still alive by Vengeance Most Foul. Speaking of Vengeance Most Foul, one other thing that I think SomeBoiOnline pointed out, or it might have been someone else, it might be theoretically possible to calculate exactly how long Feathers has been in prison for. I don't know how. It depends on how all-encompassing the shots in the prison cell are. If you could try and add up all of the tallies. I'm not going to try and do that, because I can't do maths, and I'm quite tired. And also, he's been in and out of prison so many times throughout this whole thing that it'd be hard to even determine how accurate that would be. Like, is this all one stay? Has he been back in that same cell a few times? Has it been completely redone at some point? It's just not a very accurate science. These are entirely excuses, so I don't have to try and do it. And also, even if we did somehow figure all of that out, That still doesn't help us figure out when any of this actually is. Then, and I can't believe I'm sad enough to have noticed this, The Archers is on the radio in Chicken Run.
Well, here she is. Ask and you shall receive.
That's biblical.
And that started in 1950, but then the Vans tax disc in Were Rabbit is from 1953. Also, quick side note, while I was editing this and needed to get the footage from the American dub, I ended up looking at the Were Rabbit American DVD, and this shot is included in the opening animation, but for some reason, instead of them moving like they are in the actual film, they're still moving, the background's still moving, but the characters are just perfectly still, lifeless husks for some reason. And also, I noticed in some shots the tax disc it's just gone. It's just not there. I guess it falls off a lot. But then in Loaf and Death, it's still from 1953, and then in Vengeance Most Foul, it's absent entirely. So presumably, at some point, by the time we get to Vengeance, and possibly even earlier, and it just took them a while to get around to removing it, the plasticine bit of society moved away from physical tax discs, like the biological people have in the real world. Then by Loaf and Death, they've put it back in just for a nostalgia kick, kind of going with the vibe of the traditional bakery. Side note, by the way, when I first noticed this tax disc, I set about trying to get a 4K copy of Were Rabbit, just so I could do a whole bit where I'd go to my friend's shed, because I don't actually have a way of playing 4K Blu-rays, borrow his Xbox, pull it up on the big screen, and I'd be like, aha, it's 1953, or whatever the year turned out to be. But then, the one time I was potentially willing to admit that 4K might occasionally be worth bothering with, it doesn't exist. There's no 4K release of Were Rabbit. Even in the new US collection box set, where all the shorts are in 4K, granted, horribly AI massacred upscale 4K, not actual proper rescanned 4K, but that's a whole other issue. Were Rabbit is only included as a regular 1080p Blu-ray. I even looked on less reputable sources of films to see if a copy just existed anywhere, and it doesn't. It doesn't exist, which is just mildly surprising. DreamWorks really just don't want anything to do with it. Okay, tangent over, back to the dates. In The Wrong Trousers, Wallace didn't actually make the trousers himself, or at least made them off blueprints that he didn't make himself, because he tells Gromit that they're
ex-NASA,
meaning that it's at least after 1958 when NASA was founded. We know from the calendar that it's a leap year, in which February began on a Saturday, meaning that it is concretely either 1964 or 1992 or 2020, and it can't be in the same year as Were Rabbit, because that calendar shows the film is set in a 30-day month on which the first fell on a Saturday, which didn't happen in any of those years. What am I on about? Even ignoring the fact that I forgot about this other shot where it clearly shows that it's September, even in that other shot it doesn't start on a Saturday. What am I on about? I mean, it doesn't matter anyways, you'll see in a second, but I don't know what happened there. Fine, there's many years between Trousers and Vengeance in total anyway, so if we assume Trousers is in 64 and Zoo is in 68, that's plenty of time for Wallace and Gromit to befriend and adopt a polar bear and Feathers to overthrow the zoo to this absurd extent. Except I can't do that either, because I put World of Invention before all of this, and I can't get that out of 2010. I can't put that after Vengeance because of the Norbot thing, but I can't put it between Trousers and Vengeance because of the bloody teapot. So we have basically two options here. Either Were Rabbit takes place in September 1990 and Trousers and Zoo take place in February and October 2020, which doesn't work anyway because of the 2012 and 2018 and 2021 after it. Or, and this is what I personally think, the plasticine people use a different calendar system to the biological people. Look, the whole dates thing is it's like trying to do a Rubik's Cube, alright? You get one side right, the order of everything based on marrows and teapots and gnomes, and then you start moving stuff around to try and get the other side sorted based on calendars and leap years and tax discs, and before you know it, you've ruined the other side. I can't do Rubik's Cubes, and I can't do this either. And I know that's, again, a bit of a cop-out answer, but I really feel like the calendars and leap years and tax discs method it's impossible. The plasticine people use a different calendar system. They have different heritage. They were doing football and all that. I assume Early Man isn't that factually accurate. They've got their own histories, their own culture. It's fine. They use a different calendar system. We can come to accept that. And I'm glad we can come to accept that, because while I was recording this, I quietly noticed that in order for the Proms things to be set in 2012 and World of Invention to be set in 2010, there's actually too many Christmases in between them. So this is 2010. We've got a Christmas here. It's 2011 up to... There's actually another Christmas in the way. Is it? Does that work? I don't think it's January in Great Adventures. I think there's actually 3 Christmases in the way, so I think it's actually worse than I thought it was. If it's 2010 in World of Invention, there's then a Christmas. It's 2011. It's 2012 because it's February in The Wrong Trousers, so it must be another new year, and it's the summer in Great Adventures. Then there's another Christmas here. It's 2013. There's another Christmas here, making it 2014. For all I know, there's another Christmas. There's potentially multiple Christmases in the comic strips, making it anywhere from 2013 to about 2026. And then there's the Christmas that I shoehorned in the middle of Life and Death, meaning that it's anywhere between like 2015 and 2030 by the time we get to the proms. So I'm glad we can accept that the Plasticine people use some wildly different calendar system, because that you know, absolves me of any responsibility to try and deal with that. Yeah, I just feel like, since none of this was ever intended to be looked at like this, it might be genuinely, literally impossible to make it make sense with calendars and tax discs. The Norbot dashboard says the current date is vaguely in past, and if that doesn't sum up how little these films care about what year it is, then I don't know what does. So now there's just one last thing to contend with. Those 2 Radio Times covers with the... Not this one. I'm just trying to get my money's worth out of this again. Those last 2 Radio Times covers. How... What... It's the This Mitchell and Webb book thing. How do we explain that? Honestly, I know I'm using this a lot. I'm using this a lot more than I thought I was when I was writing the script, and I realised that might be bitterly disappointing, but just keep looking at the stuff we did fit in. Focus on the positives, right? Glass half full. I think they just have to be in-universe magazine covers, which Wallace and Gromit were featured on after the popularity of their in-universe various films and TV appearances and such. And I have actually found this other version of this photo, where they're reading just a different science magazine, and Feathers doesn't have his wing up. So I reckon we could count this version as the true canon version, as like a freeze frame of their lives from somewhere in all of this, around a Christmas where Feathers has broken out of prison. Like I said, probably around the Traitors trailer kind of time. And the one from the cover where he's reading the magazine that he's on the cover of, we can consider that to be a cover either in-universe maybe, or a cover from the Flushverse. This also means that Feathers doesn't actually have his wing up like this in-universe, which I think makes a lot more sense, because I really don't understand why he'd be staring in through the window like a sad lost puppy like he is here. In reality now he's staring menacingly, plotting whichever stage of revenge he's up to at whichever Christmas this is. Oh, would you look at that? There's even a physical model made for this. Maybe I should have got it using this video somehow.
Oh my goodness!
And there we have it. My take on the entire Wallace and Gromit cinematic universe. The WAG-CU, if you will. Although, probably don't.
We interrupt this program for an important news announcement!
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Orb Reacts. Today we're going to be watching Shaun the Sheep, Series 7. I can't remember what episode it is. Shirleyverse, Part 1. Let's see if this breaks everything that I've already done for this video. How is he going to order the pizza? Is Shaun actually bilingual between sheep and English? Possibly, I suppose. Okay, he just broke the fourth wall. The same excuse as the other ones. Could just be winking generally, just into the void. It's okay for now. All right, okay. So far, not too bad. We're dealing with what I'm going to put down to being additional branches of the most boring multiverse in history. Really glad I had that set up for this. Okay, so far we're all right so far. Let's move on to part 2. Okay. Okay. That's we'll talk about that in a minute. We used to have that type of pencil in primary school. Why it's a very specific thing to just randomly notice, even though it's been there the whole time. I've had a nickel for every time flowers got mowed up in the WAGCU. I have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Okay. Alright. Okay. We're mostly okay. It's mostly alright. It's not too universe breaking. I don't have to completely rework all of it. The main thing we need to just kind of figure out here is the you know, that bit. What's going on here? For the most part, this is just branches of the most boring multiverse in history. Even though I know I said those timelines are not universes, and the title implies it's universes, but the title is technically just the title. The title doesn't actually mean anything in the context of in-universe, if you know what I mean. So, primarily just branches of the alternate timelines we already know exist. But this bit, I suppose, is it just another branch? It could just be a coincidence. I'm not sure. If in this he's come back from a branch where he's just been through the Nitomatic, which I think pretty concretely is what's happened here. I feel like we're not gonna dispute that. Then that means that it can't be the original situation, because there would have to be one of these big round sheep there to bring him back again, and for him to go through in the first place. So it must just be a branch where the multiple sheep or the entire flock are in Wallace's basement, and he's come out into there, gone through the machine, and then jumped straight back into the big sheep after he's come out of the other end of the Nitomatic. I suppose it's not a brilliant solution, but I don't know. I don't really know what else to do about this. I mean, obviously, or it could just be actually, now I'm saying that, there are some handheld shears there, so it is entirely possible. But it's the bandage. It's the not bandage. It's the plasters. The plasters are in a very specific place and layout. Yeah, I think it's just got to be that. But maybe when he came through, there was some wool and those shears on a nearby table that he toppled over and fell in with him as he was tumbling back into the chunky sheep. Charlie! This multiverse containing sheep has extra universal knowledge that he knows what's going on. He's some kind of central force of the universe, which is why he has that ability. Maybe. I mean, it's not that important, really, in the grand scheme of this entire thing. We are kind of on a bit of a tangent here. But, fun stuff. So that's it with this week's video. Although at this point, it's bordering on just the Aardman timeline. I mean, not really. There's a lot. There's no... I'm surprised there's no Wallace and Gromit references in the Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists, which is what it's called, America. There's so much detail in that film. I'm surprised there's not a Gromit in the background. Maybe there is and I just missed it. I'm sure the comments will be flooded with people talking about the many obscure pieces of Wallace and Gromit media or Wallace and Gromit adjacent media that I've missed. I will do my best to, add any of those in a pinned comment, but I really feel like I've got everything. Stuff kept coming up. Every time I made an update to the script, I saved an iterative copy of it. There's 40 versions of the script. I just kept running across more things, but I've not run across any new things for 2 weeks now. So I'm hoping, and especially considering my YouTube and Instagram algorithms have just been throwing Wallace and Gromit content at me left, right, and centre, the amount of research I've had to do. You would think if I'd missed anything, it would have come up. If I have missed anything, I'll try and work it out. But hopefully this is everything. Just absurd amount of media with, frankly, precious little connective tissue between a lot of it. There's some things that we just can't explain, like the fact the house is never the same layout. In the N-Power adverts and the bulletproof vest, the room directly down the hallway from the front door is the kitchen, and then in Vengeance Most Foul, that room's a cupboard. The door to the basement is under the stairs in Vengeance Most Foul, but it's a cupboard under the stairs in the N-Power widescreen ad, where Wallace shoves all of those sentient/haunted TVs that never come up again. Then sometimes it's the same between things. I think the DFS ad uses the same living room as the original animation for the A Grand Night In, Story of Aardman bits, I think. Or maybe the Jules advert. I'm basing this entirely on the Home Sweet Home thing on the wall. They might be even different between those. I'm not 100% sure. I've not double-checked that. I really feel like trying to arrange these based on the layout of the house as a whole third side of the Rubik's Cube. This makes the weird stuff that goes on with the Simpsons house look completely logical. So yeah, things like that I'm going to just put down to artistic license, because it's impossible. I mean, Wallace remodels the house a lot to work in his various inventions, so that is it to an extent, but I don't think that covers quite the extent to which this happens. So I think some of it is just, we just have to lean on artistic license. It's fine. All of this is media within the flushed Bondverse anyway, so it's fine. The length of the house in The Wrong Trousers and the bathroom in Vengeance Most Foul, I don't think can be explained away by Wallace remodeling things, because it's just longer than the house ever is from the outside. Like, there's some times where you could stretch it just about enough to make it make sense, like it's Wallace remodeling. Then there's kind of a middle ground where you'd have to kind of accept that Wallace and Gromit caught Feathers, got the front door changed to one without a cat flap, and only then contacted Peter Kay about the robbery, where technically, maybe you could argue that that is physically possible, but for the most part, artistic license. By the way, if anyone is watching this far in, who worked on Vengeance Most Foul, did you put the old BBC logo at the end of it out of spite for how pointless the rebrand was, or did you just do the credits in like 2021, early 2021, before they did the rebrand? Because I really appreciate it if you did it out of spite. Although if it's the latter, then the fact that nobody noticed proves just how pointless the rebrand was, because it's so similar. I should reiterate, although if you're the kind of person to comment that all of this was pointless, you wouldn't have watched this far anyway. All of this was pointless. None of this matters. None of this is important. I'm not claiming that any of this matters. Sure, I went to absurd lengths to do all of this. I've been working on this video for about a month straight. My back hurts. My feet hurt even in the slippers. I've been recording for 1 hour and 36 minutes in this session, 2.5 hours in the previous session, and another hour and a half in the session before. I'm going insane. I'm losing my voice. I'm incredibly thirsty. But apart from that, I swear none of this matters. I'm not actually seriously hung up on the continuity of Wallace and Gromit. But I do know one thing. In the words of Nick Park, after all of this,
I'm more clay than man now.
And that is it. That is it. That is a wrap. It is done. I really hope that was in focus. I really don't want to have to do that again. Please let it be in focus. Everywhere I go, I can't get away from it now, can I?